This book specifically has restored my faith in a lot of indie publishing and a lot of terrible looking covers of novellas, and novellas specifically. After some of the books we read here on this channel, this was such a breath of fresh air. A 114-page breath of fresh air, okay? Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shelby and this is Shelby Reads. As usual, if you say anything about my hair, you're homophobic. Can you believe I just used to let my curly hair be like puffy? Also, my bangs were not cooperating, so I wet them. There's nothing wrong with them, I just wet them. My name is Shelby. This is Shelby Reads, where we talk about sapphic books all year round. For those of you new to my channel, I'm a femme for butch lesbian who came out in 2013. Terrifying times to be alive. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps the channel, and hopefully someday I won't have to work at my terrible job. And if you hit the bell notification, you will never miss any updates. So as you can see from the title, today is a little bit of a different review. So I thought this was going to be a rant review because of preconceived notions that I had, I suppose. And I want to unpack those and talk about it with you, as well as talk about the book. So today we're going to be talking about Alchemiya by Katie Hawthorne. It is book 1 in her Alchemiya series. There's only 2. This is a historical fantasy novella that came out in 2016. It got republished in 2018, but it is a Regency era fantasy novella. Normally this is where I would read the synopsis to you all. However, I don't want to spoil anything. I feel like since it's only 114 pages, I think that we should go in this together without having all of it spoiled by the synopsis, obviously. So before we get started, I want to give some trigger warnings and disclaimers about the book itself, because we will be discussing the book as well as some things that I've been thinking about today as I kind of reflected on my judgmental ass behavior. But you guys are usually here because I'm so judgmental, so I think that we should have a chit chat, talk about it, think about it, you know? So the trigger warnings are provided by me and I added them onto Storygraph. However, the author did provide 2, which is sexually explicit scenes and adult language, which is true. So provided by me that are now on Storygraph: classism, cursing, death, death of a parent, homophobia, lesbophobia, misogyny, outing, sexism, sexual content, and transphobia. So my disclaimers: this review is not for the author or for stans of this author's work or family or friends. I don't think she would mind being here, but it's still intended for other readers. It's not really intended to like be author critique or praise in this case. Number 2, this will contain all of the spoilers pretty much, except spicy scenes we usually just glaze over. You've been warned if you want to read this. And normally this is where I have to say things like, I'm not bashing sapphic books and I'm allowed to have an opinion on my own channel, which I am allowed to have an opinion on my own channel. But I liked this book, so we don't really have to say all of that. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to kick this off by talking about the cover because it's important. This is probably definitely a big part of the prejudice I had towards this book when I had picked it to be the rant review for this week, because I am pretty good at picking rant review books, usually. But I always do love being pleasantly surprised. So I'm going to show you guys the cover right here. It's fugly as all hell. As you can see, I'm assuming that you're looking at it with your eyeballs and you can see what I see. But it definitely brought up an old bias that I think a lot of us have to confront, and we should just unpack it. So the age-old prejudice that my smart subscribers will all already know about is judging a book by its cover. It's literally a huge saying. I think we need to bring it back, obviously. So obviously a cover is not a good indication of what will be in the contents of the book, but it does make a lasting impression. I think that unfortunately that worked to this book's detriment. I think that this book was actually very well done, but the cover is very ugly. And if you look at some of my rant reviews, there is kind of 2 common cover threads. So if you think about ones that are similar to the Alchemiya one, we have Strength Check, which I just did, random portrait of a random person, doesn't look great on it. Her Mortal Champion takes a little bit more of an artistic style with it, but not by much. And Claimed by Her Bear has like almost like stock images of like humans and the bears. And then we have the second kind, which we won't really be delving into as much, but don't get me started on the terrible cartoon covers. So we're talking like Penny for Your Heart, Avery Daniels is Off Limits. I would even say more rendered ones like Cursed Slumber. Very ugly, not pleasant to the eye. And so I think unfortunately sometimes we can have our own bias about what kind of book this is actually going to be, and that's certainly what happened when I decided to pick this one for this week. I was trying to pick a shorter one one that I thought would make me furious and that I could just pump out in like a couple of days, but honestly I read the entire thing last night and there's nothing to rant about because I really enjoyed it, so I do want to talk about it. I think something that a lot of the books that I've been looking at recently that kind of have a similar problem are that they're novellas. And so in a lot of the novellas that I have been reading, there has been so much insta love. It's not just the novellas, it's the full-length novels as well. But I've been starting to really believe, I guess subconsciously, and I wasn't doing it on purpose, that a lot of these novellas are not good and that they're kind of all the same. So I think about like Bitter Winds by Marina Tempest. I didn't make a rant review about that one. It was not really worth it. Maybe I'll go back to it. If you guys want to hear about like a pirate one, let me know in the comments. I also think about Lesbian Boss, which I did not that long ago. The cover's not beautiful and it's not good either, but like the book itself was not very good to me. And I feel like a lot of times people speed run insta love when it's not something that everyone likes. I understand that you have less pages, but the book I am talking about today, Alchemiya, only 114 pages. Knocked it out of the fucking park. And we're gonna talk about it because I am excited to discuss this one. I really, truly am. So fantasy and historical are preferred genres for me, certainly, but when they're done very poorly, it's very frustrating, you know, to be the person who is kind of forced to be reading it. And there have been some novellas that truly have won me over. Again, a novella is something under 200 pages, I'm pretty sure. So I think about like Upright Women Wanted. That one is amazing. I think about this one that we're talking about right now, Alchemiya. I had another one, but my brain's fried. I had to go to the doctor. Being chronically ill is the worst. Anyway. Oh, A Spindle Splintered by Alchemiya also. That one was very good and it was a novella. Carmilla's technically a novella and it's my favorite classic of all time. I think I've told you guys that before. But when they're done very poorly, it's usually very poorly. And that can be exceedingly frustrating for literally anyone who just wants to, I don't know how to word it, like, I feel like they're so hit or miss, but for me overall they've been missed. So I think I was getting all of these prejudices in my head against novellas, especially ones with certain covers, and that's not fair, obviously. But I read anything anyway, so of course I can like challenge myself, challenge those biases and be like, hey, this one proved that wrong. There are exceptions to the rules we've been finding. It's fine. Also, we can't forget that Collateral Damage was almost 600 pages. I gave it a 3, but that was more like enjoyment, not like quality. I do think this is coming at a time where we're talking about very interesting things on Book Talk, but I'm too afraid to talk to people on Book Talk a little bit. Most of the community is really nice, but there's always, I feel like, warring and opposing factions for whatever fucking reason. And I understand that that's just how all communities are, but it's so stressful as somebody with like mental health conditions. I'm like, I don't want to fight with people on the internet right now. Hopefully when I get my new meds, I will like be able to talk shit, I guess, or like at least argue with people on the internet more. But I think we're talking about quality in a very interesting way, in a very interesting time, but I feel very nuanced about the entire topic. I don't really agree with any one person yet that I've seen because I think there's so much nuance to why the kind of books that I rant about exist. I think there are a lot of reasons. I mean, I would say taste is obviously subjective because like I liked this novella a lot, but some people might really hate it. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. It doesn't affect me. But I will say that we do have to talk about some of the quality. I know that quality can kind of be varying depending on what the person thinks, what the, you know, what each individual consumer thinks about said books. However, I think we can agree, if you've seen my Collateral Damage videos, which I hope you have, they were a labor of love for my lesbian community, okay? That one, holy hell, like the quality issues. It's not even just that the story was kind of stupid. It's also the fact that the author didn't research anything about the United States, but this is not like a fantasy version of the United States. It's the word choices, it's the odd grammatical errors. And I would also say that a lot of books I've been running into, even if they don't have the grammatical errors, there is a lot of continuity errors, such as in Cursed by Malignant Magic, which I talked about not that long ago. Most popular rant review, go me. There's a lot to be said point about the varying quality, and I will say that we're all arguing about what qualifies as good literature or not, and I don't necessarily think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. I love Wuthering Heights and Frankenstein, but that doesn't mean that other people will enjoy them. I think there's a lot of nuanced things that are going on that have to do with education. Our government in the United States purposefully defunding education to make people less literate, which has caused the literacy crisis in the United States. I think that personal preference, but also sometimes it's literary elitism. I have been thinking so hard today about some of the things in high school where I was being kind of snooty because I understood things, but I wouldn't have understood the things in the text if I hadn't been obsessed with those eras and had done a lot of research and read a lot of books that take place in those eras or classics or whatever. And my classmates might not have done the same thing because it either wasn't accessible or it wasn't interesting or it was too difficult. I remember very specifically when we were reading Romeo and Juliet in class and the nurse makes the fucking sex joke, right, to Juliet about her being on her back all the time, you know, getting dick down, that's what she means. But no one in my class knew what it meant but me, and my face was turning like beet red, and my teacher made me explain the fucking joke and I wanted to die. But again, I had been obsessed with many different eras of historical things, so I had been exposed more to that kind of language to understand what was going on. And what made it more accessible for my classmates was they watched the 90s version of Romeo and Juliet, and a lot of people went, oh my god, I get it now. And I was like, okay. But when I was there, I didn't really understand. And I think about so many times in school where it wasn't just like a literacy issue, it was an accessibility issue, it was an interest and bandwidth to engage with it issue. And I will say that I find it very odd that we teach a lot of the classics without explaining any of the history going on in the country that it was written in, or like the world, depending on what time period we're talking about when we read classics. And so there are a lot of things in classics that people might not understand and they don't want to research. Not everyone's a history nerd. So I've been thinking a lot about how kind of what's considered highbrow literature is kind of inaccessible to a lot of Americans specifically. I'm not talking about other countries, but Americans specifically, because we have an average reading comprehension of like a 6th grader, which is like a 12-year-old for those of you who are not Americans. And I know this is another odd thing to bring up, I just kind of want to be a little chatty before we get to the thing, is I think everyone's seen, I think her name is Emerald Fennell, but it's the Wuthering Heights in quotes, the new movie that's coming out with Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie. Ooh, it's a hard day to be a Wuthering Heights fan. I saw the interview because I was trying to judge it less because I was like, you know, I don't agree with any of this. I don't agree with Jacob Elordi being Heathcliff because if you have reading comprehension, that is a brown man. I don't like Margot Robbie as Kathy because Kathy is 18. I don't like whatever the fuck we're doing with the costumes, but that's personal preference, obviously. Like, I'm not a costume purist because I like Bridgerton, you know? Like, I don't care about the historical accuracy always. My issue is that she was like, yeah, I wanted to make a movie that felt like when I read Wuthering Heights when I was 14 and like when I imagined that. I read Wuthering Heights when I was between 12 and 13. I also read Jane Eyre that same year. I was into the Bronte sisters. It's also reading a lot of Jane Austen. I knew that Wuthering Heights was not a love story even at that age, so I do truly worry about people's reading comprehension. I like the idea of like, oh, this is like what it was when I was a kid or whatever, but I'm also deeply concerned about the reading comprehension, obviously. Again, I'm not trying to sound like an elitist. I am deeply intertwined with working class culture because I've been forced to be here my entire life, but also because I'm in butch femme culture, right? So I understand that a lot of the highbrow stuff is not necessarily accessible to the middle and lower class, depending. It's not necessarily accessible to disabled people. It's not necessarily accessible in general. And another reason I think is because a lot of classics are kind of meandering long. They have a lot to say. There's a lot of thoughts. I think of like Les Miserables, where they were talking about the sewer incessantly, and I was like, Victor, can you please focus? He couldn't though. He couldn't. He was into the sewers. And people don't necessarily have a bunch of extra time to be doing all that all the time. And other books are more easily digestible because they're written in a modern day English. They are very straightforward. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I was thinking like, do I not like straightforward narratives? That's not true. Do I not like the meandering long kind of things of classics? Most of the time I'm fine with that also. The only classic I can think of that I really hated was The Scarlet Letter. And it's because it was so dry. Like it should, like if a woman had written that, like if Emily Bronte had written that, it would have been the most gossipy, dishy, disturbing shit. But instead we are stuck with a man writing it, and the morals and the themes and the writing I think is interesting, but it was dry and boring, and that's just personal taste, right? It's hard to boil everything down to all of that. But back to where I was going. My problem is when we're not kind of demanding better quality from our books. And I'm not saying that every indie publisher who's ever published should be striving to be like a classics author or something. But I am saying that I think because a lot of the quality has kind of declined, paralleling the constant devaluing of public schools, public educations, not teaching phonics, not teaching media literacy really well, and all of these things also just being inaccessible when they are taught. I think it's just a combo of us getting worse literature. But of course, worse is subjective. Worse is subjective, obviously, to a certain extent. We also have to kind of reckon with the fact that a lot of indie authors, this can't be their full-time job. And part of that is because of capitalism, our terrible country. It's a side thing. They're probably not doing as many rounds of revisions and replanning their stories as much. Some of them certainly are. I think about Rebecca Thorne, who started indie, is now traditionally published. I think of a lot of sapphic books that started off indie and then were traditionally published, but sometimes it also goes the other way. And I know we don't love to talk about, well, we love talking about negativity on this channel, but let's talk about Haunting Adeline quickly. Haunting Adeline is atrocious, obviously for many reasons, and it does depend on your point of view. However, I have read quite a large portion of that book. I don't think most people could say it's well written, but it went from being indie published to professionally published, so that's a whole thing now. And I think that because traditional publishing does have some inherent barriers as to who can get in and not versus indie publishing, we do have some disconnect there. However, we all see when that seeps through because we have things like Haunting Adeline, a lot of Penelope Douglas and Colleen Hoover. I know it feels like the low-hanging fruit, but it is... Oh, that being said, I personally think there's nothing wrong with just a little trashy read. Unfortunately, a lot of these authors turn out to be bad people. That's a separate issue as a whole. But again, see, I feel like we need to talk about all of it in a very nuanced lens. And I have heard people saying that a lot of the conflict on TikTok right now is because they're attacking romance and romantasy, which are specifically women's genres. I want to err on the side of caution because I don't want to say that there's probably no misogyny involved. I don't believe that. Misogyny has infiltrated every single system, every single community, everywhere. It's everywhere. Is there probably some misogyny element? Sure. However, I also think we need to talk about the rate at which a lot of those are churned out versus some other ones. Now, of course, there's more fast fashion of books than just romance. I think romance is just one of the easier ones to pick because it's so visible comparatively. I think specifically about, you know what, I'll come for one of my own instead of going for one of the straights because I feel like that's fair. I think about Alexandria Bellafleur, who comes out with a new book, it feels like every other second. And let's think about Ashley Herring Blake. She is coming out with a new book every 5 seconds, it feels like. It's too much. And you can't really develop, I don't think, well-written, well thought out books that way. Maybe you can. Maybe you're a genius and I just haven't read enough of their works to know. I do enjoy Alexandria Bellafleur. I've read one book by Ashley Herring Blake and I hated it. I'm giving her another chance because that's who I am. I'm very generous. But I think we should talk about how fast a lot of these books are coming out without trying to shame people. I think people get very defensive when there's a lot of shame, and on TikTok they want to get that special hook to get you interested. But the problem is that even if they have 50% valid things to say, people are still upset and hurt and angry. That's why we get to where we are. But I really don't think it's as simple as all of that. I think of Audra Winter and the Age of Scorpius debacle. I wish I had jumped on that. I didn't even know about it until it was like done. I was like, ah, shit. I mean, I know it's still going, but I'm not gonna like start all over again, you know? When she republishes that freaking book, then I'll do something perhaps. Gotta get on that train. But she tried to be like, people don't like my book because the main character is autistic and a lesbian, and I'm also autistic and a lesbian. And I've heard many excerpts from it. I've watched a lot of videos about it. I don't agree that that's why. I think it's because it's not well written. I think it's because it's not well developed. I think it's because it's not well edited. I think that there's a lot of quality issues. And I think that the quality issues are something we're going to see even more of. I don't think it's wrong to criticize some of the quality issues and the speed at which some of it is coming out. But I think when we're only targeting some some genres, that's when it kind of becomes a problem. You know, like I know that feels a bit off topic, but I really did want to talk about some of the things I've been feeling and seeing before we talk about this book, because a lot of you, if you watch my rant reviews, you know my frustrations. They are repeated constantly. It is insta-love. It is everything is rushed. It is that the plot doesn't make sense. It is that the world is not well developed or thought out. The magic system is not thought about very heavily. It is a lot of the same kind of things that feel, to me, obnoxious. Now, again, everyone has different taste. However, this is my channel, and I just want to talk about how excited I am that I found something that was to my taste. I also just want to pop in at the end of filming because I like to watch book talk drama kind of... how do I put this? Play itself out. Like, I don't really get involved in it because there's no point, really. In my opinion. I think sometimes we have really good conversations, but I think the people who need to hear those conversations don't want to hear it. However, I've been listening to a lot of Black book talkers who I follow or who just come up on my FYP who are talking about how a lot of the terrible literature issues we're having also has a racism element to it, and I would certainly agree with that, but I would also just kind of like to piggyback onto that a little. I'm not trying to steal it, I'm definitely agreeing. However, I read a lot of people of color written and starring sapphic books. So obviously that's where I'm getting my info from, right? Like, I definitely think that those are usually typically better written most of the time. However, I will also say that there are some amazing sapphic fantasy books. We have amazing sapphic fantasy books. Obviously, I never stop talking about the Locked Tomb, but also the Magic of the Lost, the Burning Fire trilogy. Like, we have so many, but these are the same people overwhelmingly, because the girl who did the video, which kind of made all of this book talk stuff come up, she had A Court of Thorns and Roses in her background. So she's obviously not, she's the pot calling the kettle black, obviously, but at the same time, she's not probably one of the people that are reading sapphic books. Sapphic books get a really bad rap because the people who aren't attracted to women can't sexualize the characters in the same way. And because there's a deep-rooted misogynistic lesbophobia problem within the bookish space, because it's everywhere. It's in our entire society. You can't divorce it from any of that. So if you were reading more sapphic books overall, particularly sapphic fantasy, because I feel like they were talking about romantasy, I think that you wouldn't be having the problems that you're having. I did just want to bring up the racism argument as well, because I think that that's a very important component. I think it's not just the devaluing of education, as I've been trying to say on this one video. I do think it's incredibly nuanced, and I just want to make sure everyone knew that I know it is, and that there's some issues that I don't even think of because, like, they're not right in front of me. Like, we could even just talk about how people are not reading from different authors diversely, you know, like disabled authors, people of color authors, LGBT authors, immigrant authors, people whose language is in English, like their first language is in English. We are not doing that on mainstream book talk. I'm not on mainstream book talk, so this isn't really a problem for me. I have some books that are duds, but there are plenty that are amazing. And I think that we just need to be reading diversely for a reason. I think there's very specific reasons why we're doing that. It's to support the marginalized authors, but it's also to get better perspectives and also to learn what you like better in fiction, and to be able to start tackling some heavier topics within fiction if that's something you want. That's what I want to say. I think that this issue is so nuanced, and I want to know you guys' opinions, but at the same time, I think that we might be trying to make it too difficult at the same time. Like, there are obvious reasons as to why mainstream book talk and booktube are not the same as the side I'm on. That's what I'll say. I think if you're reading poor quality books and you're sick of it, I think you maybe need to step back and ask yourself many questions as to why this is. That's all I want to say. Okay. So I would do what I normally do, which is go chapter by chapter. However, there are no chapters. It's only 114 pages. It is very short. So instead of going completely beat by beat, I think we're going to do a broader overview. But I will just say, before we even get going, hopefully I could use this as a clip or some shit, Shelby. This book specifically has restored my faith in a lot of indie publishing and a lot of terrible looking covers of novellas, and novellas specifically. And I know that I was having a bias going on, but sometimes when something keeps happening, your brain is just like, that bias was right. And I'm glad that I found something that was so deeply joy fulfilling to me. It was a great, like, hour and a half or however long I was reading it. Because I was highlighting a lot of stuff for this video, but then by the time I got done, like any of the things that I thought would be complaints, they worked out in a way that I thought made a lot of sense, and I adored that. So also, just to tell you, I've read a lot of nonfiction about these kinds of time periods like Regency. This is obviously a fantasy world. I will not be critiquing it too heavily on those aspects, but I am going to be talking about occasionally is some interesting lesbian facts about how lesbians got away with things in certain times, if they were actually as accepted as some people try to make them out to be, and which acts were criminalized, because there were a lot of things criminalized. I found the name of the place. Okay, so we are dealing with a place called Chrysopia, which is a kingdom, I think, as far as I can tell, not that important. It seems kind of reminiscent of the British Empire, however, it's fantasy, it's not one-to-one. And we start 1 year ago with our main girl, Eugenia. Her name is Eugenia Ratna, to actually be specific. So to talk about her family history very briefly, her mom has passed away. She is from a family of immigrants who are brown, and she lives with her father, her brother Delaney, and her sister Rebecca. So the way that this world works, because I want to start setting the scene for you, is that the magic system is alchemy. And if you don't know a lot about alchemy, probably not going to do a huge rundown for you. However, it is the idea of like I don't know if transfigure is the right word, but transforming something into something else. So think about turning water into wine or turning something into gold bars, right? That's the idea. And each family has a secret kind of recipe book. They have their own laboratories, and their secret recipes are only accessed by the eldest son, who is the heir. This world has misogyny as a heavy backdrop. However, I think that it is done so well, and I think that it was so deeply important to the story, and also deeply important to the Regency era from which it is trying to like get some of its inspiration from, that I didn't hate it. Didn't make me feel kind of weird. So Eugenia is a lesbian, and this is obviously a problem for her within this Regency society. She also is very independent and intelligent, and she works on her own alchemy things, even though she is not allowed as a girl, well, I should say woman, as a woman, to access her family's special recipes and laboratory and everything. So 1 year ago, we are with Eugenia, and she is with someone named Lydia Cremora, who is another young woman, and they are having a sneaky get together at a party. You know, we're having some good old casual sex. And I will say that for a book that is so short, there are 4 sex scenes. They are all done well in a way that doesn't give me the ick, and I don't hate them being there. I didn't feel as though they served zero purpose and were just about making you horny, so I did actually enjoy them. I know, wild. It's wild to hear me say I enjoy shit on the internet. But they get caught by Lydia's brother, and Eugenia is basically like, oh shit. So we are then propelled into the now. Eugenia, otherwise known as Jeannie, is not allowed to go to parties really. She's not being invited to anything because she got caught, and she took the brunt of the being discovered. Now, I would like to briefly talk about actual Regency era Britain and the European continent. Romantic friendship was quite common. However, it was probably winding down around this period from what I can remember, because romantic friendship in the United States lasted a lot longer because of the Civil War and because a lot more men died. So they were like, oh, it makes sense that rich, wealthy white women just want to live together with their inheritances for the rest of their lives. So no one was really questioning that. However, it was starting to wind down and start to go towards the Victorian repression era side of shit. However, in Britain specifically at least, there were no laws specifically about 2 women doing anything together unless there was a phallic object or unless one of them is pretending to be a man. Just so you know, there were criminal punishments for that. And just because some ladies did do romantic friendship and live together doesn't mean that they didn't get absolutely roasted, at least behind their back, by society. We have evidence of letters specifically about the ladies of Llangollen. It seems like they were tolerated, but really how much? Hard to say. Jeannie's brother and sister are deeply worried about her not being able to get married, and they actually do want to be married. They want to participate in society as straight people. Eugenia doesn't really see what the big deal is, and she's like, it was just a little tryst, like, why do I have to get all of the heat when Lydia was doing the same shit? But her dad says Lydia Cremora had a very narrow escape, because we learned that Lydia was forced to marry some guy. And this guy is someone that Jeannie thinks is gentle enough, but he's a bore, which honestly is probably the best you can hope for in Regency England, or Regency anywhere. It's not England, but you know what I'm saying. And her brother accuses her specifically, kind of multiple times throughout the novel, that she is trying to tank her own marriage prospects by causing scandals because she doesn't want to get married. This is kind of a big point of contention specifically between her and her brother. And her dad is like, you need to think about the disadvantage you've put your brother and sister at. Okay. And he tells her that she's going to attend the grand ball. She doesn't have a choice. This is like a royal ball kind of situation. It's the biggest event of the year, for sure. And her father says, you better figure out a way to redeem yourself in the eyes of high society before you enter into it again. We learn a lot about how Jeannie is much better at alchemy than her brother Delaney. That is usually how it works, unfortunately. And she thinks about how her family is kind of the cause of her suffering and that they refuse to understand her. Jeannie decides that she is going to make an absolutely intense color dress, like a deep purple, through alchemy, and she's going to kind of turn some heads, even though she doesn't really want to do anything that has to do with high society. This is kind of like a big point we will come back to later because I think this is so well done and so interesting. When she and her brother get to the ball together arm in arm, their little sister Rebecca is also there, but not arm in arm with everybody. She and her brother Delaney have kind of a heated exchange behind some curtains about Jeannie's behavior. And Delaney says this: I don't care if you want to ruin your life. I don't care if you live with me and my family forever. I don't care if you have affairs with other women. I don't care if you spend your life practicing alchemy, trying to make a mockery of me as I fumble along, trying to fulfill the demands of generations of our clan and the people who depend on it. But you will not ruin our lives. Do you understand me? I do think that this book will take a very nuanced take on the kind of feedback, I would say, that she's getting from her brother. The knock it the fuck off. You know, and she gets very hurt and upset by this. And it's like, I don't understand you actually, thank you. And he says, you're as smart as old Flamel, who is like an alchemist thing, right? Himself, until it suits you to play stupid. And I do agree with him here because I do think that if she sat with her emotions for a second, she would realize kind of why she's feeling the way that she's feeling, because it's complicated. It's not just a one-off thing. She feels guilty for affecting her siblings' chances at happiness, but she also feels miserable because she cannot attain her own kind of agency. She says, what if I don't obey you, pretty much? He says, you'll pretty much be shut up in the house doing the things you always like to do, but you won't be going out and partying anymore. And she's upset about this. She's like, shut up like an invalid. Though I will say that this is actually kind of close to what I can picture him thinking that she wants, because this is what she does with most of her time. I'm not defending him. I do think the way he went about everything is not necessarily great. However, I feel that this book is well written and nuanced, so I feel that we get to see why her siblings are upset with her, and it's a good read. And then he's like, I'll tell you what happens if you refuse my deal. We will find you a husband. She's like, you can't without my consent. And basically we learn that the rules here are, yes, I can, because until you're 21 and you're deemed old enough, we can find you a husband. And she said, no, that's father's thing. And he's like, yeah, and I'm his heir. Won't be that hard to convince him to get you married. That is quite shitty. When you understand a lot of the complexities of Regency society, though, kind of makes some sense why he's trying to lay down the law. I don't agree with him, obviously. However, I just want to put it out there. And he says, do you think I enjoy threatening my own sister? But I can see no other way. I want a life of my own. I want this life. Let me have it and I will help you as much as I can. Thwart me and I will return the favor. Are we clear? She says crystal, and I do think that it's so fascinating that siblings are always kind of the same, threatening each other. Again, my childhood, not good. But she is furious and she really wants to figure out a way to get back at him. But she's also slightly proud of him that he finally gathered up the nerve to stand up to her. So she goes back to the party, the grand ball, and someone approaches her immediately, and his name is Lord Oliver Plumtree. And Jeannie can't figure out if she likes him or hates him for talking to her without a proper introduction. And he doesn't introduce himself as Lord Oliver Plumtree, and she's a little bit sassy. I love the banter in this one though, because it feels very natural, particularly when it's Regency, it's British feeling at least, you know what I mean? And she was like, I was so looking forward to an evening of being invisible. And he's like, in that dress, which is fun. And she's like, oh, you're hoping to flatter me? How original. And they have some banter about being invisible because she's like, do you want to be invisible to Mr. Plumtree? And he's like, yes, absolutely. And she's like, in that jacket. Kind of loved it. And then she realizes, oh my God, you're not Lord Plumtree, are you? Like, you must be his son or something, right? And he's like, nope, that's me. She's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, she's trying to recover her manners, her Regency manners. And she's like, you look so young. Like, this is so silly of me. And she thinks, oh, I might have just ruined any chance at reconciliation with my family tonight of like kind of being like, hey, he talked to me. Like, if he thinks I'm rude and awful. So the Plumtrees are a family that we learn is from the North. They are a very popular, very well established, very rich family, and one of the most rich alchemic families. So Lord Plumtree is essentially one of the most eligible bachelors in the entire society. Like, everybody wants Lord Plumtree. Like, everyone knows about them. Their tenants are apparently universally happy. They're well known for a lot of different things, and it's very crazy a little bit. And Jeannie just thinks, what he wants with me, I don't know, girl, if you don't figure it out in 5 seconds. And he's like, I don't care that you called me Mr. Plumtree instead of Lord Plumtree. I don't give a rat's ass. And he's like, sorry about me speaking so easily about your reputation. Like, that might not be polite. And he says, I really don't put stock in such things, honestly. And Jeannie is a little bit offended. She can't tell if she should be. She's like, okay, so you came to talk to the black sheep of the family then. And she thinks to herself, when men have preferences like that, when they come up to you and talk to you, when they think you're kind of a fallen woman, they want a bone. Right. And she's like, what other purpose is there? And I'm not gonna bone him. And he says, actually, like, I came to find someone who might be like-minded, like myself. And she wonders if Lord Plumtree is queer like her, if he heard that she likes women and that's what this is all about. And then he asks her for a dance. She said this will cause a huge scandal because the juiciest bachelor in the land and the most disgraced lady are going for a dance. And he's like, you need not convince me, my lady. I've already asked. The banter in this one was bantering for me. I don't care if y'all agree. For me, it was doing it. So they go to line dance, you know, like they do in Pride and Prejudice, you know, like with the But while they start dancing, she starts thinking about her brother again, and she thinks that the reason why she was so upset with him is because of shame, not because of other reasons. But even though she feels ashamed and feels bad about making things difficult for her siblings, she thinks that there was no reason for him to threaten her. And she thinks about how he offered her the carrot, but the carrot was more for his own guilty conscience, not for her. And Lord Plumtree says, you're distracted. Should I not have asked you to dance? She's like, no, I'm very sorry, my lord. My brother and I, we had a fight. And Oliver says, I've heard brothers are prone to fighting with, you know. And of course, our girl Jeannie has to bring up her social knowledge and says, you have sisters, I think, and one of them is out now. And he says, yes, I have 4 sisters, but one is out. And she asks some polite questions like, how does your sister like the city? And he's like, she loves it as much as I hate it. And she's like, hate an urbane gentleman like you. And he says, I prefer my home, I prefer my lab, I prefer my cauldron to regular people. And like the people I know back home. And Eugenia thinks this is very funny, and she's like, how very unfashionable. And he says, I let my clothes and my carriage be fashionable enough to make up for my own shortcomings. Like, Shelby, where's the lesbianism? Think big picture with your brain. Do you trust in me? Do I bring you the lesbians? Yes, I do. Well, queers, whatever. I do. So hold on tight, okay? It will happen. Be patient. This has great pacing, in my opinion, which is why I enjoyed it. Then they talk about money and also alchemy and power a little bit. And she asks if he believes what the commoners say, that anyone can do alchemy, not just the noble families who have decided that they are the ones who do it. And Plumtree laughs and was like, okay, but what about the implications? Like, what about people who say it's dangerous to let common folk do alchemy? And it could be like world ending. And she says, yeah, more like privilege ending. She's a real one. She's a real Lizzie Bennett, you know? And Plumtree's like, sadly, I don't think we can fix the world before this dance is over. And she kind of thinks about his lighthearted dodging, but instead of infuriating her, it's interesting her. And she's like, well, then then asked me to dance again. And he asks for the next dance and she says yes. And everyone has started speculating because they have danced together multiple times. If you know Bridgerton, similar idea. And Lord Plumtree has danced with several other girls while there, but he's danced with her more than anyone else. And now that Jeannie is kind of alone for a moment, her sister Rebecca runs up to her, so excited about everyone talking about her positively, everyone thinking about her. And Jeannie's like, I thought you didn't want people talking about me. But she also thinks to herself that Rebecca definitely didn't have anything to do with her brother's threats because she's a brat. She's a brat, but she's not cruel like that. And Rebecca says, I don't mind people talking about you when it's good. And then some distant relation comes to see them because now Jeannie is the talk of the town apparently. It's not very important, I promise. It's just there's so many people in society. Not all of them are named, which is lovely because we don't have to figure it out. But I'm just saying, like, they're trying to make it seem like it's very populated with people, right? She is still thinking about getting revenge on her brother though, just so we're clear. But she wants to do something to get justice for her brother without ruining her sister's prospects at all, which is very nice of her. At the end of the evening, Lord Plumtree comes back to talk to her and asks if he might have the pleasure of calling on her sometime this week. And would you be home on Bride's Day afternoon? And Jeannie says, of course, actually, yeah, I would be there. You should come and dine with my family, absolutely. And he says he's gonna enjoy it and good evening to you. Thank you for making this a much nicer affair, pretty much. And Jeannie thinks to herself, for a man, he's very civil indeed. We then have Jeannie taking breakfast in her room after the big party. And she asks for a like Bloody Mary, basically, for literally the morning, which I guess in Regency era would actually be more towards midday because a lot of these ladies, when they're out, they're just going to parties, going to sleep, going to parties, going to sleep, going to parties, going to sleep. The original party girls, if you will. The amount of alcohol she has though does worry me that she might be a little bit alcoholic. However, we're gonna look past it this one time. I feel like she could be doing much worse shit, like in this time period, like laudanum or opium or something. We're gonna let it slide. So she misses lunch and then she eventually goes down for tea. She really doesn't want to deal with these people and I think she's slightly hungover, which is fair. And her brother is so excited to see her and is like, oh my god, like what a triumph you had last night. This is amazing. And she says, I promise it wasn't for you or because of you, by the way. Rebecca's like, don't be cross, Jeannie. Enjoy your moment. And then she talks about how short Lord Plumtree is for a man. She was so surprised, but he has such a handsome face and he's so elegant. And she's like, one always thinks that these country lords will just be bumpkins. And Delaney gets annoyed about this. He's like, they're not bumpkins, like the Plumtrees of all fucking people. And he says the oldest daughter, Lady Sylvia, is very, very wonderful as well. And Rebecca says, yeah, she made a splash, but she's so quiet. Like, I can hardly imagine why anyone thinks she's charming. And Eugenia's just kind of eating her cucumber sandwiches and absorbing this. And she's reading the paper. And this is the first mention we get of the SSA, which is the Secret Society of Alchemiya. This will come back. This is important. I loved the direction all of this went. So no critique from me. And Rebecca's like, I'm off. She's going to see some twin friends of hers and they so do rely on our taste. And Delaney's like, try not to spend too much. And Rebecca is funny as hell and she's like, I am the soul of the economy. Material girl. And Delaney's like, okay, I actually wanted to talk to you by ourselves, so I'm glad that she's gone. And he's like, I'm so glad you saw sense with my, you know, advice, and look at what it got you. It got you Lord Plumtree. And Jeannie is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I did precisely what I wanted for my own reasons. And he says, but I promised you. And she says, I want nothing from you. And she's like, hey, as a courtesy, you should know Lord Plumtree is dining with us tomorrow. I'll let Mrs. Lee and father know, but I figured you ought to turn up and pay your respects. And then she leaves the dining room and he's calling after her, Jeannie, 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 but she's still pissed. We're now at the next day. Dinner gong time. They also wear a lot of saris because again they're not white, and I just think that that is so cool, and I bet they're so beautiful. Like, I love it. I love it. I love when we do something a bit different, especially when it's magical or when it's like an interpreted idea of Regency, like Bridgerton. I am a Bridgerton show fan. Books, no. Show, yes. Can't wait for the queers in that one. You only have to wait like what, 2 more fucking seasons. They also have some other people over for dinner, so I guess it just doesn't look like Lord Plumtree's the only one over. However, they're not important, so we're not going to talk about them. Lord Plumtree is late, but he comes, he kisses Eugenia's hand and asks for her to forgive his tardiness. And she says, I can always forgive an excellent entrance, Lord Plumtree. You look quite dashing tonight. You know, Lady Whoever, by the way. And everyone's getting introduced. He's a hit. He's a hot blonde man, by the way. There's a couple of people who are like flirting. I think there's this kid who flirts on Rebecca. Not sure if it's Rebecca. Yeah, it is Rebecca. Just kidding. And Plumtree says, poor fellow, because he's like, you know. And Eugenia says, well, he allows it, so she does it. Like, I suppose you'd never allow it. And he says, I gladly allow it. It looks odd if one doesn't allow ladies to make a fool of you once in a while. So she's sitting there thinking, because they're having good banter, they're having a good time. She wonders what he's about. If he liked women, is he trying to court her? It seemed unfashionable because he'd gone about it in a strange manner, in her opinion. And she's like, I've never met a man I've liked more than Oliver Plumtree, but that doesn't mean I want to marry him because, again, lesbian. And she's like, maybe he doesn't understand me as perfectly as I had hoped, and I'll have to relieve him of any illusions gently as long as he continues to be a gentleman. And eventually Jeannie asks him to go for a walk with her in the garden, and he's like, of course, yeah. And they cut to the chase pretty quick, and she says, so is your intention to and she's kind of like not wanting to say it, and he's like, you'd like to know if I'm attempting to court you? And she's, yeah. And he's like, not exactly. And she's like, the thing is, Lord Plumtree. And he's like, just call me Oliver, it's fine. She's like, Oliver, I'm not interested in men. Not of any kind. I might find one aesthetically pretty, but the sorts of duties a wife is expected to perform, like, do I shock you? Are you embarrassed? And he's like, I did wonder, but no, I'm not the least bit shocked. She's like, but you did mean to court me. And he's like, that's a more complicated question than you might suppose, but all I ask is that we get to know each other. She's like, this isn't something I chose for myself, it is simply how I am. And he's like, I understand entirely. So like, do you remember what I said to you at the party? That I thought you might be like me? She's like, I thought you meant queer. And he's like, I did mean that. And she's like, you think it would be good for us to spend company together in the company of like an opposite sex person in public, right? Like, that's what this is about. He's like, and privately. He says it's very odd in town. They're like in a very big city. Think like London-esque, I would say. He's like, at home I have friends who are like us, but here I don't know anyone. And she's like, hey, do you like women? Like, excuse me for being blunt, but he's like, I like women, yeah. And she's like, and men? And he's like, yep, bisexual king. She's like, so many options. And he's like, one would think. She asks if he's lonely, and he says, sometimes are you? And she's like, sometimes, but she's surprised she admitted this to herself. And Jeannie is excited that she has made a friend. We kind of jump forward a little bit. She has her cousins and her sister and some girls from nearby families, at least the ones who will still speak to her. But it's so lovely to have Oliver as a friend because he's charming and easy, and she likes to go out riding with him or talk at parties. And she's getting loads of invitations now. Like, the thing with Lydia Cremora never happened. And she thinks such was the power of a rich alchemical nobleman public approval. Yes. I mean, I feel like we see it in Bridgerton. Again, I know you guys are like probably like, stop talking about Bridgerton. No. With Daphne and Simon, I think that that's very clear. She's at a party and someone asks her if she knows about the secret society of Alchemiya and what's going on with that. And she's like, no, you know, I read an article. There's some suspicion of the Grand Duke's involvement, right? And this girl is like, no, like Lord Plumtree. And she's like, what about him? She's like, well, everyone says he's one of them, that he pushes for their influence in politics even. And Eugenia asks good questions like, in what way? And the other woman's like, oh, I don't know. I leave that to the men. And Jeannie is like, of course, you don't know anything and you're just gossiping. And this girl tries to say he's quite a catch, but if he's involved with like this sort of thing. And Eugenia's like, they're a myth. That society is a myth that powerful men keep alive to give them the illusion of yet more power, of insurmountable power. And she starts talking and she's like, well, the other girl starts talking and she's like, few are more powerful than Lord Plumtree already is. Anyway, like, have you seen his home, which is Waldegrave Abbey? It's legendary, it's huge. And of course, Jeannie's like, oh, I think Rebecca needs to be out of here. We then jump to Jeannie having met Oliver's sister, the one that is out, Sylvia Plumtree. She always carries carries a book with her. And Eugenia thinks she's a very interesting person. She's one of the most interesting people that she's met in a long time other than Oliver. So when they go to the opera, she makes sure that she's kind of sandwiched between Sylvia and I think Rebecca. They talk a little bit about the kind of political power that both of their families have, a little bit kind of in that sly Regency way of doing so. But they're both, Sylvia, Jeannie, and Oliver seem to be quite a bit for the common folk rather than their own class. This will come back, we'll talk about it. But I was worried at first when I was reading this again. We're talking about some of the assumptions I had too, I suppose. I was worried that it was kind of gonna go the way of Bridgerton with Eloise, where I felt Eloise's feminism was very much, what can feminism do for me and not for anyone else? How can I use it to my advantage, but I don't really care about the rest of the women because I'm also secretly kind of sexist. That's what I was worried about. Doesn't go that way. Yeah. We love great writing. Sylvia invites Jeannie to Waldegrave Abbey, their home up north. And Sylvia also says, you must bring your sister, of course. And Jeannie's like, maybe we should ask your brother's permission. And Sylvia says to that, Livy doesn't care. Hey, Livy. And Oliver just kind of goes, yeah, no, never, I don't care, whatever. And Jeannie's like, he doesn't even know what we're talking about. And Sylvia's like, it's better that men don't. And Jeannie thinks that she's gonna get along really well with his sister. The next morning, there is a gentleman here to see her. It's Oliver, obviously. She has him in one of the sitting rooms. They're gonna have tea. Oliver's like, sorry for coming unannounced. My sister said that she invited you to Waldegrave Abbey. And Jeannie's like, I'm sure you're here to rescind the invitation. He's like, no, not at all. I came to beg you to come and like take it seriously, accept it, come to Waldegrave Abbey. And she's like, well, if you like, I'm a bit curious. And though I hate to leave my experiments, the country air might do me some good. And he's like, then you'll come. And she's like, yes. And he's like, and Rebecca will come? And she's like, I'm sure that she won't refuse the chance to see your abbey and also to get a new northern bow. He's like, okay, we're going in a week. You can come later if you're not ready. And she's like, oh my God, so soon. And he's like, no, please take your time, however long you need. And Jeannie's like, I actually think I'd find town quite boring without you. So I'll see if Rebecca can be ready on such short notice. And he says, hey, if you need to go back to the Golden City, which is where they're from, it's like the city, like the town, right? Like London, basically. He's like, I'll give you a carriage, servants, whatever you need. Like, you can just leave. It's fine. And she's like, why would I want to leave? Like, what an odd thing to say with an invitation. I was a little worried it was gonna be Crimson Peak. It wasn't. I mean, I love Crimson Peak, but still, like, I wasn't feeling reading that in my nice little Regency romance, okay? And he's trying to be like, well, if you grow tired of my company, or like, I guess it doesn't matter. And she's like, Oliver, he's like, no, please, forget I said anything. I'll explain everything when we get up north. I want you to see the place first. She's like, first, before you explain what? Like, she's really confused. And she's like, don't be cryptic, Oliver, it doesn't suit you. And he's like, I know I'm being melodramatic. It's that damned opera's influence. He's like, no, ignore me. You and your sister come. If she'd like to come with us, or you guys can come later. And Jeannie nods and lets him kiss her hand. And she has more questions, but before she can ask him, he's gone. They're going up to the north, and Oliver's riding on a horse outside the carriage, and the ladies are riding inside the carriage. Rebecca really wants there to be a highwayman. And Lady Sylvia is like, I freaking hope not. I like this necklace. Jeannie thinks about how Oliver gets to kind of enjoy like horseback riding, enjoy such pleasures, have his coat open, do whatever. But she's also excited that she won't have to see her brother for a hot minute. So they eventually stop at an inn called the Duke's Head. They're gonna have tea and dinner. Jeannie's late to dinner, but everything is very relaxed, very low key. Like, no one is upset. There's wine, everything's fine. Eventually, Sylvia and Rebecca go up first, but Jeannie and Oliver hang out for a second. And our girl, Jeannie, who knows she's a fucking lesbian, thinks something a little crazy. And she's like, I declare, Oliver, I've never known a fellow so easy to get on with. I've half a mind to ask you to take back what you said about not trying to kiss me. And he says, you flatter me, but I'm glad to hear it all the same. And she's like, are you though? And she's like, would you kiss me? I'd like to try just to see how it feels. And Jeannie kisses Oliver. Oliver's kind of aghast. And Oliver pulls back in astonishment, and she's like, I am sorry. I didn't know what came over me. I drank too much. It's my fault. And he's like, no, please, like, don't apologize. I confess that I find you very attractive. Indeed, I should love to kiss miss you, but I can't. It wouldn't be right. She's like, you're fastidious, I see. And he's like, no, 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 no. Like, it's not about premarital sex. I don't care about that. He's like, I just want to tell you something. Like, I want to tell you about the house, my family, everything, and then propose. I wanted you to see everything first and hear me out, and then we could discuss. And he is like, I made a pig's breakfast of everything. Like, can I start at the beginning, please? And Eugenia feels bewildered, and she's like, I wish you would start at the beginning, please. And Oliver swears her to secrecy and says that if you tell anyone what I am about to tell you, my whole family will be ruined. And I feel I know you enough now, Jeannie, to know your true intentions, but I need you to make a promise that what I tell you will never leave the company of just us two. Eugenia thought for a moment and then decided that if Oliver had murdered someone or some other such nefarious thing, a drunken promise could hardly bind her. Otherwise, she had no qualms promising to keep a friend's secret. She says, I do so promise, Oliver. So he talks about how his father died when he was young because there was an outbreak of the plague, and the cure was quite slow to transfigure with alchemy, and his father wanted all the tenants to have it before him. He says, well, an older sister of mine died very early in the outbreak when only our baby sisters had been dosed, and also my twin brother Oliver died. And she's like, you're not Oliver. And Oliver says, no, though sometimes I hardly know. In a way, it's nice, like keeping part of him alive. He's always with me. We were but 13 when he died. I am Olivia. Oliver is interred in my coffin. And Eugenia does the quick math real quick, and she's like, you had no other brothers. And Oliver, aka Olivia, says, only some wretched, grasping cousins who would run the estate into the ground and starve out the tenants. The estate is entailed upon the nearest male relative, you see. It's custom everywhere, but we're even more rigid in the north. We learn that Oliver, Olivia's mother, came up with the idea because they were so very alike, and Olivia was always so very tomboyish. And at first, she was horrified, but then I thought, what would become of my sisters, all of our tenants? And of course I chose to do this. And she says it's idiocy that women can't inherit anyhow. Now, this is something that actually happened with women pretending to be men. We have, well, we also don't know if some of them were trans men, to be perfectly candid, because they didn't have the same language for it as we did, but they lived as men for their entire lives pretty much. This did happen. Unfortunately, we mostly know about the people who got caught, whether that was caught while they were alive or caught when they were dead. It depends, but no matter what, they were caught. But Jeannie is like, oh my god, how very clever of your mother and you. And Olivia says it's not without its dangers. Like, the cousins have been circulating rumors about me, reasons I will never have an heir. And Jeannie's like, oh, they say you're queer. And Olivia's like, if only they knew in how many ways that they were right. Now Jeannie has kind of like a billion questions in her head. And Olivia says, in truth, we have to have an heir apparent eventually, but whether he belongs to the cousin branch or not doesn't signify. I could adopt a cousin and raise him, or I could adopt one of my sister's children eventually. I've had lawyers working on it for a long time, but the important thing is keeping up appearances until such a time as that is likely. And I do need someone to run the house when Sylvia marries. And Jeannie's trying to wrap her head around it, and Olivia's like, I apologize. I wasn't sure if I should tell you before the invitation or after. Like, I thought you might like to know all at once, but now I think And Jeannie is like, oh my god, no. She's like, Olivia, what do I call you? And Olivia's like, my sisters call me Olivia or Liv when we're alone, but I know it's difficult to remember in company. And Jeannie is like, Olivia then, and squeezes Olivia's hand. And she says, I tell you now, regardless of how Waldegrave Abbey is situated, that I would gladly play the part of dutiful wife in this scheme if that's what you meant to ask me. And Olivia says it is. Also, by the way, I was so excited when it was a woman. I was so pumped. I had a feeling. I actually have an idea for kind of a similar book, to be perfectly real with you. It's not exact. It's not fantasy either. I want dark romance because no dark romances have been good. I want mafia dark romance. One of them pretending to be a man or is just assumed as a man just based on appearance and is butch, and the other one is femme. I have an idea for it. Probably never gonna write it, but I do have an idea. And Jeannie says, I have no desire to marry elsewhere. I know you would allow me to do alchemy stuff. And Olivia says, yes, except for our clan's recipe book specifically. Like, I'm sorry, but... And Jeannie's like, never apologize for that. I understand you mean to preserve for your family and you must. and I'll be glad to help you. And she thinks about how this will allow her to escape Delaney's potential tyranny. And she thinks about how there's so much to gain, but also so much to lose. And Olivia says, as for the more delicate matters, we don't have to bang, you know, we don't have to do it, we don't have to genuinely live as husband and wife. Like, if you want to continue your affairs that you were having before, there would be no objection from me. Like, just try to keep them out of the public eye. We have a lot of resources, so there should be no difficulty. And Jeannie's like, what about you? Are you going to continue your affairs maybe? And Olivia is like, I haven't the luxury of affairs, I fear. I feel it disingenuous of me to start such a thing with a person who doesn't know my truth. And so if you can, for the sake of those I love, indeed, for my own sake. And Eugenia frowns and says, what business is it of anyone's what's between your legs? And Olivia says, were I a man misgendered at birth, I might agree. I have several friends who struggle with society, thus who've been kind enough to open my eyes by sharing their stories with me. I, on the other hand, am masquerading as a man, which is quite another thing. So I do like that they separated that out also. There are trans characters in here. Loved it. Loved it. Like, queer people have always existed. It's just a matter of language and whether their stories were preserved, whether they were caught or not, whether they were punished by the law. It all has a lot of things going on. And Jeannie feels something shifting between them. The truth of Olivia's gender hadn't created an attraction in itself so much as Olivia's resourcefulness, wit, and adaptability in taking care of her family made her an even more fascinating personality than Eugenia had thought Oliver. And that was attractive. And Jeannie says, but you truly like women. You shoot her shot. And Liv is like, yeah. And Jeannie is like, do you find me attractive? And Liv says, who wouldn't? Girl. And Jeannie's like, okay, then why not kiss me anyhow? And Liv is like, well, I wanted to tell you. And Jeannie's like, okay, now you've told me. And they hesitate a little, and then they start making out. They make a huge mess. Like, they like spill some wine some places and whatever. And Jeannie is really excited. I'm gonna read this because they're gonna bang. I gotta tell you, but I didn't hate it. See, I actually loved their being friends with Jeannie thinking there was no possibility of actual sexual things happening. And then it turns out, surprise, masculine woman, hell yeah. Hell yeah. To the yeah, yeah, yeah. Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Eugenia felt a rush that was more than lust or even newfound affection. There was something delicious about introducing a novice to the fine art of lovemaking, something both powerful and sweet that delighted her above all other things. Never before, however, had she had the opportunity to educate and care for a woman with Olivia Plumtree's depth and intellect. I feel like we did try to do a little not like other girls things. However, since they are so deeply connected now as friends, and she wasn't really ever in romantic relationships with the girl she was sleeping with before, I don't hate it. And also, I love that we bring up the concept of virginity, but instead of making it creepy and weird, we make it, oh, I'm excited to show her new shit. And there is some asking about have you ever had sex ever? And Liv is like, no. And Jeannie's like, okay, but with yourself though. And she's like, oh yeah, I've done that a little bit. So I do enjoy that, and I love the communicating. I love that we're not framing this in kind of a creepy way. And there's no collateral damage, loss of innocence talk. You know, it's all very much, have you done any of this? We should talk about it quick. And they make out for a while. And they do have some sexy stuff like on the buffet. They've kind of like kicked some stuff off of it and it's everywhere. And Liv is like, I'm gonna give them a huge tip to clean this up. It's fine. Money does fix things for the rich somehow. I don't know. And they're like, call me Liv, call me Jeannie. Obviously much easier to moan out, obviously. I'm not going to read this to you because it's all the sex stuff. They start downstairs where they were eating. They go upstairs to Liv's room. And I really did like that it wasn't just sex stuff, because I do like the sex written in here. I find it not gross. There was really only like one instance of saying slit, but in that context I was kind of okay with it. I can't explain it. And I didn't even mind when they called her CLIT like the plump pearl of her CLIT. I didn't even find that gross, and I think it's because we really built all of this up and I really liked it. But I also really loved that there were some sentences that were also about how they were feeling. So Eugenia only wanted Olivia, who had buttoned herself up so tightly for the sake of her family all these years, to come completely undone. I actually, banger, I can't explain it. I think that the thing I love about this novella is that even though it's so short and even though there's a lot of sex, a lot of society stuff, some courting, whatever, and courting as the wrong gender, actually, I love that we take a lot of time and consideration to make it good. You know? Like, I love that we think about how everyone's feeling, how people's thoughts can change, like how the character flaws do actually get worked on in this. We'll get there, but like, I loved it. I also love this description here. I'm going to read it to you about the sex time. Once the corsets were off, Eugenia spent a large portion of the evening sitting on Liv's face in a most undignified and satisfying fashion. What was remarkable about the sex wasn't the powerful orgasm she achieved in Olivia Plumtree's bed. It was the way they both laughed, as if the sex was a shared amusement, a friendly entertainment, and an exchange of pleasures instead of something dark or shameful. I do like how we're talking about how this queer sex is revolutionary for them. I really like that. There's some more stuff about how their relationship is really important to Jeannie. I'm so excited to talk about it. And she does spend some time checking Liv out after, you know, they've boned and Liv falls asleep. But I will just say that she didn't just like look at her body, even though I did love the descriptions of how she viewed Liv's athletic and more tomboyish body. But I also love that she thought about how uncertain Liv seemed as a woman, wanting for affection, determined and clever and strong. And I thought it felt so romantic to see these two people go from being friends, well, strangers to friends, and then to lovers, even though the gender stuff was a little weird for a second. I really enjoyed it. I also just feel so much solidarity with all of the women who pretended to be men, whether they wanted that or not, simply to get the privileges in life that they rightfully deserved. I have so much empathy and love for those people, truly. And I like that it doesn't make her think immediately, we're gonna live happily ever after, we're gonna be so happy. And I'm gonna just read you the paragraph because I think there's so much nuance in 114 pages and I love that. Eugenia couldn't pretend that they would live happily ever after. She had no way of knowing, considering she'd only just met Liv Plumtree 10 hours ago. What Eugenia could be certain of, however, was that Olivia's situation was better suited to her own than anyone else's in Chrysopoeia, and consequently the world. That Liv should be looking for someone to run her house as a wife. It was almost too perfect to be possible. The freedom that would come with the marriage was so much more than Eugenia had imagined possible for herself. Oh, she'd wanted it, but to actually have it within her grasp. How lucky then that the bearer of said freedom was so very charming and had such lovely legs. I thought it was so cute and sweet. I don't know, I loved it. So Jeannie slips out because she doesn't want them to get caught. Obviously that would cause a huge amount of problems. And the next morning they like smirk at each other for their meal and they like let their hands touch. And I think that like I love that kind of stuff from Regency era stuff. I think that's why I love historical, is because there's this longing and repression and not everything devolves into sex immediately. And if you like that, that's fine. I understand that certain books are for different things and for different levels of enjoyment, but to me this is the kind of thing I like. I really love the pining, the yearning, the gentle touches in public, the knowing glances. I love it. And Jeannie's thinking, I'm sure my sister, who's looking smug as hell, is going to write home to father and our brother saying that she's definitely gonna get married to Oliver. They get to Waldegrave Abbey and it's gorgeous. There are like cool goblin-like and gargoyle-like statues that are very interesting. And we learned from Sylvia that there are stories about a Plumtree ancestor who was apparently the inspiration for them, a miserly old man whose heirs had immortalized him thus. I think that's funny as hell. And Rebecca's like, isn't this kind of disrespectful or something? And Sylvia is like, we're in a reverent lot. Like, that's likely why he haunts the Abbey, but she's like kidding. And Olivia is there, and of course we have Rebecca being like, Lord Plumtree, it's so beautiful and so big, you know? And Olivia's like, isn't it though? It feels just like very cool to me. Like, I can't explain what I imagine it being like. Like, part of my brain is like, it's kind of gothic, but then the other part of my brain is like, no, it's like Netherfield from Pride and Prejudice, especially like the 2005 version. I don't know how to feel. Maybe it's a combo of two. I don't know. But Jeannie is sure she can do really well here. She's like, I think it'll be great. And she also looks at Olivia and they kind of smile at each other and she's like, yes, I think all of this will do very well indeed. I'm like, girl. See, I love love. People stop accusing me. No one's accused me. Oh my god, I got a weird shorts comment today though, where I just did like a sapphic books I've seen in BAM, and I'm not in it. Like, it doesn't even matter. But I just used a Willow song from a while ago because it was apparently trending again on TikTok. I'm trying to actually look at that crap now. And they were like, this music is awful. And I just commented back that I didn't make the music. I was like, what? What the fuck? It's like, yes, I am Willow, making sapphic book content. You caught me. The housekeeper appears to make sure everything's going all right. It's Redmond. Everyone's like, yeah. And then 3 girls come tumbling out the door and they're shouting for Sylvia and Oliver. And Olivia's like, a fine first impression. I feel like it's like meeting the Bennett sisters. You're like, most of you calm down. I think Mary was gay. It's my hot take. Argue in the comments which Bennett sister was gay. I still think Mary. And they go up to Jeannie and they're like, we all heard about you. And one of them is like, I'm Cherry. And Oliver's like, Olivia. And it's like, Charlotte. So Cherry's just a nickname. And apparently next season, Cherry gets to go in town, whether Sylvia's married or not. I'm like, how do you do? You're so beautiful. And she's just like, Liv, you weren't lying. She's a stunner for sure. I love it. And then the 2 youngest sisters are Katrina and Marion, and they link arms with Rebecca. They insist upon a tour and lemonade. They visit the gallery for a little bit, but Jeannie goes into the library. She is fascinated. This is the largest library she has ever seen. This is the scene from Beauty and the Beast where he shows her the library and she's like, damn. And you know what, Jeannie? Woman after my own heart, okay? I did a tally including ebooks and stuff. I own over 300 something books. Hell yeah. I mean, they won't all stay. Like, if I don't like them or it's a series I'm never gonna reread, I sell them back to thrift books. However, I get it. And Jeannie says, buy the Grand Duke's indigo balls. And I actually think that that's funny. Leave me alone. And they're like, we'll make sure someone calls you for tea or that they leave you something if you don't show up. And Sylvia shows her where like all of the sections are, etc. Cherry is still in the library. She just falls asleep on the couch. And there is a case of glass where there are a bunch of books in there, and Jeannie like pushes her face up to the glass to be like, what's in there? And there's a book called Of the Call, and Olivia has come in and says, oh, like the book, right? And Liv says it's not under lock and key just because it's old, and Jeannie's like, it's forbidden or dangerous. And Liv says, some would say so. And she's like, okay, so I'm including the Grand Duke. And Liv is like, yeah, probably him, yeah. And I'm not gonna ask him though, because it cost a fortune and I don't want to lose it. And Jeannie's like, you interest me. And Liv says, I'd gladly take credit, but I think you were already interested. I'm like, I can't be happy and full of whimsy, okay? I'm cute. And Liv, instead of making her ask, says that you can read it if you want. I ask only that you not share what you read within. It's a most unconventional version of our country's history. And Jeannie swears that she will speak of it to no one except for Liv. And Liv says, I think you've proven yourself trustworthy. And then she like unlocks the glass case and she's like, you can read it. And Liv says, most of the others in the cabinet are just really old. So I don't want the girls, her little sisters, to be playing school with them and like wrecking them up, or having servants borrow them and then forget them, because the servants can take out books because they care about the people who aren't rich in this book, and I love it. Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes I'm like, ugh. And Jeannie's like, oh, that happens often. And Liv says, almost daily, I should think. I wouldn't mind if they read these as well for the most part. I only need to know where they are. Investment reasons. Funny how Olivia always looks strangely ironic when she said things like that, as if protecting the family fortune wasn't a worthy task to which she dedicated her life. Indeed, for which she changed it entirely. I love how much credit Jeannie really gives to Liv and how impressed she is. I love it. And Jeannie promises she'll return it shortly. And Liv says, I find you difficult to deny. I'm afraid. Hello? Yes. Sign me the fuck up. So we get some information from this book and from another one. I think that it really helps with the world building. This is something I really want to compliment this book on. I didn't have world building questions. And in only 114 pages, of which there are 4 fucking sex scenes, I think that's very impressive. I think she knew what she was about. But they talk about how before everything went down with the history, which we'll learn a little bit about, that alchemical knowledge could be obtained by anyone literate. Alchemical knowledge could therefore be taught. But there were a lot of things that kind of stepped in the way of that, like relations with other countries, people calling alchemy magic sometimes and trying to persecute. And it also talks about how natural philosophy in both Eastern and Western territories was crippled by the loss of practical alchemy. Alchemy can never truly advance without the understanding supplied by natural philosophy. So I think we have some interesting information. And Eugenia's kind of frowning at the book, and she's like, natural philosophy was generally considered an unnecessary and plebeian pastime, useful only to farmers in their fields and bored old ladies who enjoyed watching birds. And she thinks it will take more convincing for her to listen to this book's theories, but she's very interested, so she's going to read it anyway. We then skip to a Mr. and Mrs. Jacob Plumtree showing up, and there are two well-dressed people who arrive and enter into the room like they own it. And Redmond, I don't know if he's the housekeeper or, no, I think he's the like steward or something. He says, "I'm sorry, they wouldn't fucking wait, my lord." I'm like, fair. And Liv is like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like, thank you, cousins. To what do we owe the pleasure?" And since Jeannie's not stupid, like a lot of these fucking characters end up being, not in this book, but you know what I mean. You've seen my channel. She's like, this must be the grasping cousins who want to like take this place. And Mrs. Plumtree has a pinched face, though she couldn't have been above 35, and her hair was pulled back severely with some silly little ringlets left out and pasted to her high forehead. She might have been pretty if not for that. And then the man is slightly older, but still in his prime, and he's handsome in a way. He has crazy sideburns, apparently. Very in fashion in a lot of eras, I fear. But she thinks that he looks very covetous, though, like in his eyeballs. Like, well, yeah. And Mrs. Plumtree is like, "I heard you had some friends for the week and we were passing through." And Sylvia and Jeannie share a look because, of course, they happen to be passing through when news of two eligible women, one of whom the whole of Chrysopeia must know Lord Plumtree had favored all season in the Golden City, turned up as guests. They could probably feel their precious entailment slipping through their fingers. Yeah, I do love this kind of like high society trying to cheat each other out of fortune shit. I love it. You don't have to, but I do. And Liv is like, "Okay, please join us." And then Liv introduces everyone. It's Jacob and his wife Dahlia, and then introduces everyone who they don't know. And I feel like they act like Mr. Collins from Pride and Prejudice. This is not like a complaint. This is I love that kind of character. The guy cousin tries to say, "This is always the most charming table in the country with you girls present, but I dare say the ladies Ratna have added to that." And Jeannie thinks, and the compliment had begun so well, too. But Liv is like, "I dare say they have. It was kind of their brother and father to let us invite them." And Mrs. Plumtree is not subtle. And she's like, "How long are you guys staying?" And Jeannie is like, "A few weeks." And Sylvia's like, "At least, but we hope at least one of them never leaves," because Sylvia is stirring the pot. And Mrs. Plumtree is like, would you hold a guest hostage or like captive? And Liv is like, "In a manner of speaking." And they're like sharing knowing looks. I love it. And Liv is like, "Hey, to a footman or footwoman, I can't remember, can you bring some bubbly?" And Mrs. Plumtree's like, "At tea? Like, really, Oliver, your excesses." I'm like, what's wrong with that? Tea's like in the afternoon, right? And they don't work. I mean, they do, but they don't. Let her drink. And Liv is like, "Today is a special occasion, and since, you know, you were so good as to call on us, I might as well announce it to everybody. Lady Eugenia Ratna has done me the great honor of accepting my hand in marriage." And everyone explodes in joy. I loved it. And Rebecca's like, "I didn't know it was already arranged." Like, "Oh, well done, Jeannie. Like, how charming. I'm gonna be a bridesmaid." Everyone's excited except for the Plumtree cousins. But they love their reaction because they're like, "Haha, these stupid cousins. And Mrs. Plumtree's like, how sudden this all is. And Jeannie's like, not really. And she says that. She's like, after all, we saw a great deal of each other during the season. Marriages are generally arranged after 2 or 3 public meetings, and Oliver and I have had months of balls and long walks and carriage rides, haven't we, darling? And Oliver says, yes, of course. And I think my sisters will agree that sooner is better. And Cherry's like, of course we do. Summer weddings are the nicest. Everyone knows that. I mean, I don't really want to be hot and sweaty and sticky at my wedding, but you do you. And everyone is so excited, obviously, except the cousins. And Jeannie can't wait to see Liv alone after that. So she's like knocking on her door and she's like, are you indecent? And Liv is like, come in, I'm very indecent. And Jeannie's like, delicious. And Liv is in the tub. And immediately Jeannie's like, oh my God, their faces. Liv is like, I almost wish they hadn't shown up and we had had time to arrange a ball to announce it. Like, it would have been even more gratifying to see them shrink like that in public. Hell yeah, I love shady bitches. And they're like, they were dying for you to stay a bachelor until death. And Liv's like, and dying sooner rather than later. I'm like, and Jeannie can't stop laughing. She's like, this is the most diverting tea I've ever had. And she calls her darling again, and Liv is like, I like when you call me that. I like it too. And Jeannie's like, I like sweetheart. That was new. You called me that. I liked it. And Liv's like, I did it mostly to enrage them, but now that I think about it, I kind of like it too. And Jeannie's like, it's rather convenient that we like each other. And Liv's like, makes the idea of marriage even more convenient, you mean? And Jeannie's like, I do. It's like, you know what else is convenient? And then it's some kissing and they're into each other. And Liv asks if she wants to get in the bath with her, and they do that. And Liv is like, put more water in please, because Hadley won't come unless I call. And she's like, is Hadley your valet? He's very statue-like. Does he know? And she's like, he does. And he's not so stolid once you get to know him, and he understands things. He's respectful. And Jeannie takes this to mean that Hadley's also queer and that the rest is none of her business. And Jeannie's like, where do you find these wonderful people? And Liv is like, oh, around. You were pretty easy to find. And Jeannie's like, Infamy has a few things to recommend it. And that's something that Lord Plumtree had said at their first meeting, and I love it. And she's like, my infamy made me convenient. And Liv is like, and my money makes me convenient. And Jeannie's like, not to mention your glorious house, your gender, and your pretty face. And she does a little striptease before getting in the tub. And I kind of like it. And Liv is like, do you really think this is gonna work out between us? And Jeannie's like, our arrangement, like, I don't see why not. And Liv's kind of like, it's hard to believe, which I understand. And Jeannie's like, it's kind of a stroke of luck. And Liv's like, it's more than that. I'm too hopeful maybe. My life has been a delicate web of lies for so long. My sisters have been the only honest thing in it. And I really love how vulnerable we are in this book. I enjoy the places we go here. And I want to talk about a paragraph because it's so very important to me. It's gonna be like a couple paragraphs because I feel like it's hard to explain without them talking about each other. Okay. Wasn't that Eugenia had never considered as much precisely, more that the scope of Olivia's deception was so massive as to overwhelm any attempt at true empathy, which was rather the point, wasn't it? Eugenia had been lonely. Yes, she hadn't been willing to admit it even to herself when it seemed that was her lot in life. It was too painful to think she'd never have more than the odd dalliance with another woman, never have a true partner in life and love, and so she simply expunged the possibility from her mind. Why torture herself with fantasies? But now that the fantasy might prove reality after all, she could admit it had been hard, and possibly unfair even to be denied that dream. It might not work out between her and Olivia, they might end up fighting or unhappy, but there was a chance now, and that was more than Eugenia had ever dared to dream of. She was so glad she could give that sense of hope to Liv too. Not just the possibility of a partner, but the possibility of honesty in that partnership. I loved it, and this does come up again later. I loved that we talked about how she couldn't even allow herself to dream. It makes me think this is such an odd reference, but if you're gay and you don't feel like Elsa from Frozen is gay, I don't trust you. But in the musical, Elsa from Frozen has this Dangerous to Dream song, which is so deeply beautiful to me. It felt like that. It feels like I can't let myself have anything. I can't let myself even fantasize about having anything. And I resonate with characters who are like that so heavily. I really love it. Are you guys excited to see me positive? I'm having a good time. Even though my doctor's appointment made me in pain today, I'm having a good day. I can't explain why. Don't ask me. And she also thinks to herself, maybe she could really love Olivia. Maybe she was already on her way. She wasn't quite ready to dwell on that point though, so she broke the kiss to say, I've never had sex in the bath before. So that's what they do. I again liked these sex scenes, so I think that you should like give it a chance if you really want to. I liked it. I liked all the sex scenes and I like their banter. I like it. Okay, so they're hanging out after the banging in the tub, and Liv is doing Jeannie's hair for her. Swoon. Oh my god, if I could not do my hair. I decided just not to do my hair for one day because I'm tired of this shit, and it's the poofy the poofy hair I always have, but I'm just like, oh, so I wish someone would do that for me. And she compliments Jeannie's hair and it's like, it's beautiful. And Jeannie's like, do you miss having long hair? And Liv says, I did at first, but this is so much simpler and I kind of just got over it. I do like doing hair though, but I have 4 sisters, so it's fine. And then Jeannie conversationally brings up that she started to read that book, like, where did you get it? Liv says, the black market. And Jeannie's like, there's a book black market? And Liv's like, oh yeah, thriving one, yeah. Yeah, there's a black market for everything. And Jeannie's like, do you believe what the book says? That the call, which is like this big event thing, isn't what we thought it was. And Liv's like, how far have you gotten? And she's like, only the first chapter. Like, it kind of, like, getting up here to the north kind of made me more tired than I thought it would. And I want to read more tonight. And Liv is all like, shame, I thought I might have exhausted you. Which is funny. And Liv is like, I do believe more of this book than what I was taught in the schoolroom, like Old Flamel 1 and the Victor's Right history. And I do think that's really interesting. And Jeannie is like, well, was there anyone to fight? Because like the history that it was put out as is that Flamel put out this call to strengthen his own country. They called it Midland for a while, and he wanted to provide safety for repressed alchemists in the West. And some came from the East as well, and everyone was excited about the advancements and stuff. And Liv is like, he changed Chrysiopia's entire way of life from noble to common. He rearranged society based on his own vision. Those who didn't fit into it, well, you'll come to that. And Jeannie's like, okay, I guess I'll reserve judgment of this book until I finish. But it's really difficult to imagine, to think that Flamel is anything other than, and Liv says, a savior? Yes, well, for my family, I'm sure he was. And potentially for yours, but what of the non-alchemical power structure in Midland? What happened to it and where did it all go? And Jeannie has no reply because she doesn't know what happened. And Liv is like, there were nobles who had no alchemy back then, as there are in other countries now. And as for the commoners, well, some were no doubt elevated, but others were only passed to a different version of the same indentured servitude. And Jeannie's like, you believe this passionately? And Liv is like, is it really that far-fetched? And Jeannie's like, actually, you know, now that I think about it, not really at all. And then Hadley, the valet, is there, and Liv is like, 1 minute, please. And Hadley's like, sure, my lord. And it's apparently almost dinner time. And they're like, how time flies when you're being honest. Dinner was kind of funny at first with the cousins who are all pissed. And Liv talks to her and is like, hey, my cousin Jacob is insisting we go fishing tomorrow. I'm sorry. And Liv is like, it's gonna be up to you to kind of keep my sisters in line at breakfast. Sorry. Unless you want to like eat in your room, I won't judge you. And Jeannie's like, no, it's fine, it's fine. But is it normal to get up this early in the country? How dreadful. And Liv is like, yeah, it's an awful habit. But fishing is his excuse for staying a few days. So he has to make a big show of it. And if I go once, I can easily get out of it the rest of the time. And Jeannie's like, do what you must, darling. Kisses Liv's cheek. It's so cute. I enjoyed it. And then she reads chapter 2 of the book she's reading later. It talks about how alchemy is kind of actually a little bit shady. For example, the Flamel family is still the only in the known world to possess the ability to transfigure base metal into gold, obviously for their own advancement. But they think that it had probably originated from the East. It's not even his own thing. And alchemists weren't oppressed in the East, and they aren't today either. We learn what the Western countries primarily used alchemy for before, which was potions healing, but Eastern alchemy takes a more holistic approach, and they also think about the balance of the world, not just what's best for the people. And the author kind of accuses Flamel of potentially stealing the gold recipe and the transfiguration recipe from the East, from Deccan, which is where Jeannie's family was originally from. And Jeannie's kind of like, you know what? I actually do kind of believe this. One can never trust a man to do anything for the right reasons. That's something she thinks, and I agree. And she thinks best not to put them all on a pedestal. It's later, and Rebecca and Cherry had like a lot of wine. And they go up to their rooms, and then it's Sylvia, Jeannie, and Mrs. Plumtree, I think, for breakfast. And Mrs. Plumtree is rude, obviously, but she's like, so Sylvia, like, I hear you did well in the Golden City. How are your prospects? And Jeannie's like, oh, she was a smash. She was great. And Mrs. Plumtree's like, she's very quiet though, isn't she? Though Eugenia had thought the very same at first, she suddenly wished she had sat across from Mrs. Plumtree so she could sneeze egg at her. Love it. She, Sylvia, piped up with a small smile on her face, speaks when she has something worthy to say. Others might like to talk for their own importance. I love her. I love her. She's wonderful. They're all wonderful. It's great. Sylvia's needed by the housekeeper, unfortunately, which sucks. And Katrina and Marion leave as soon as they can. They're off. They're out of here. So it was just Jeannie and Mrs. Plumtree. And Jeannie just tries to read the paper instead of dealing with Mrs. Plumtree, which is totally fair. And she sees a new article, which is New Secret Society of Alchemiya inductees tell all ritual sacrifice and power. And Eugenia snorts at this, but she reads on. It's a lurid piece of fiction dressed up as journalism, and she knows that. She says in a few weeks time, they'd place the blame for this theoretical ancient secret society squarely on some opposing faction in the Grand Duke's court, and that would be that. It leaves a foul taste in her mouth though, and Mrs. Plumtree can't mind her own damn business, and she's like, is something bothering you about the fucking paper Lady Ratna? And Jeannie's like, oh, not really, it's just like this silly report on the Secret Society of Alchemiya. And Mrs. Plumtree's like, so called, like, it is very much called that, why should you think otherwise? And Jeannie's like, it may be called anything you like. I don't doubt the appellation so much as the very existence of the thing. And Mrs. Plumtree is like, it is real, and you can't doubt that, like our dear Oliver is a member. And Jeannie's like, he never was. How absurd. Oliver would never be involved in something so snobbish and silly. And Mrs. Plumtree's like, it may be snobbish, but it's certainly not silly. It's dangerous, like whatever he keeps in the laboratory vault downstairs, in the secret passages beneath the abbey, even those locked cabinets in the library hold secrets that could cost a man his very life. Jeannie thinks because of the book comment, it kind of hooks her a little bit because there's a kernel of truth in whatever the fuck she's saying. And she's like, are they related to the SSA? And Mrs. Plumtree's like, of course they are. Where do you think a man could get such things if not for powerful friends? And Jeannie's like, the black market. And Mrs. Plumtree says, and who do you think runs the black market, especially in information? Like, I would have thought a city girl was less naive. I suppose you've been sheltered though. Great families always do so. And you Ratnas, you're in jewels, right? And Jeannie's like, you know we are. It's like, and I am far from naive, Mrs. Plumtree, though I thank you for your concerns. And Mrs. Plumtree's like, I just know we'll be great friends when you're in the family. And Jeannie's like, yeah, I fucking doubt that, in her brain. So Jeannie goes back to her room to stare at Of the Call, the book that she was lent, and she thinks, well, Mrs. Plumtree is obviously jealous of the estate and is kind of looking to throw problems to make her want to not marry Olivia. So she doesn't read the book for the rest of the afternoon though. Oopsie. The girls later, like the little sisters, beg her to go to town with them, and they're like, okay. She doesn't want to, she has no excuse, but still. And they're starting to already get really busy planning for the wedding because the sisters are a little crazy. And Jeannie's kind of like, I'm kind of worried Olivia's gonna be mad about them telling literally everyone on Earth, because they're literally telling everyone on Earth that we're getting married. But she doesn't have the heart to like stop them because they're so happy. And they grab a bunch of stuff like bonnets and shit. And then Liv comes, and you know, Jeannie's like, you smell like dirt. And Liv is like, and fish guts, I bet. Like, glad to see you anyway, sweetheart. Like, I see the girls have told the entire village. And Jeannie's like, yeah. And she tugs Liv into the bakery, and Liv is like, here, like, it's too public. And Jeannie's like, yeah, but I wouldn't mind if you didn't smell so bad. She's like, no, I need to talk to you. And there was another SSA thing in the paper, and Jeannie's like, you're familiar with the SSA, right? And Liv is like, why do you ask? And she's like, your cousin informed me. And Liv is like, of course she did. Speculation. And Jeannie is like, you didn't answer my question. And she's like, yes, Jeannie, I'm familiar with the SSA. She's sounding a little impatient. She's like, I know what people say they are. And Jeannie's like, is that all? And Liv is like, do you really think now is the time and place for us to be talking about this? Which I agree with. We're already keeping a lot of secrets about what's in Liv's pants. I think that we should maybe move to a different venue. And Jeannie's getting upset, and she's like, you are familiar with them. Why won't you just say so? And Liv is like, can we please do this another time, please? And she's like, but when? And Liv's like, when we're married? And Jeannie's like, I should marry you before I know that you're involved in some shit. And then a bunch of locals come over and start congratulating Liv, and is like, oh my god, this must be her. And Liv introduces Jeannie to all these townspeople. Everyone's very excited to be meeting her, and everyone's saying congrats, all that. And she and Liv walk away from the town with Liv's horse. She's just walking the horse, and Liv opens her mouth to say something, and instead Jeannie's like, this won't do at all. And she's been twisting herself tighter and tighter over Liv's refusal to give a straight answer, and she knows that Mrs. Plumtree's stories are mostly fantasy, but they obviously contained a small kernel of truth. And Liv is like, Jeannie, please, I honestly cannot say anything about it. And she's like, even to your fiance? She's like, yes, even to my fiance. And it's not what you think, I swear it. And even that is more than I should say. And Jeannie asks if Liv's sisters know. And Liv is like, no one knows. And Jeannie's like, ha, caught out. There was nothing to know. Liv would have said so. Not said that. Eugenia shot her a triumphant look. And Liv is like, Jeannie, please, I am begging you. You're making a mountain out of a... And Jeannie is like, don't tell me to calm down. And Liv is like, no, I didn't mean. But Jeannie doesn't trust herself not to say something horrible, which is good. If you don't have something nice to say, just don't say it. I mean, depends. If it's to Nazis, fuck them. But like... And Jeannie's like, I think I'm gonna go back with my sisters. You can ride that way. Good day, my lord. And then Liv is like, Jeannie. And it's really, oh, it sucks. And Jeannie's decided she's gonna start an investigation against Liv. Rude. Rude. I'm back. You're getting gremlin skincare, Shelby, because I have to leave for work early because it's my early week. Ugh. Like, comment, subscribe so I can quit. Our girl Jeannie starts questioning literally every single servant about whether Olivia/Oliver is in the SSA. Everyone is adamant that Liv would never be involved in such a thing. Like, why do you think that? She's like, of course they would say that they're loyal. Duh. And she pretty much gets nowhere with this. And the Plumtrees, Mr. and Mrs. Plumtree, the cousins, they leave after dinner that night. And then she decides to try asking Sylvia, the eldest sister, who just laughs at her. And she's like, it's a serious question, Sylvia. She's like, okay, but you know Livy by now, right? Do you really think my brother would be that dishonorable? And Jeannie has to admit she doesn't think that Liv would be. And Sylvia says, I don't know everywhere that Liv goes, and I also wouldn't like to. Real as fuck. And Sylvia's like, I'm sure you will know everything about him that you want to know before long, all right? But Liv is really worried about it, and she's like, her siblings would just say that though, wouldn't they? Because they love her, she's supporting their family. Like, wouldn't she just say that? And she's getting rather frustrated. The next morning, she has a note on her bedside table, and it says, Lady Ratna, it has come to our attention that you mean to marry Lord Oliver Plumtree. We suggest that you rethink this course of action. Should you continue on this path, we will feel compelled to tell the world Lord Plumtree's secret. And it's signed the SSA. And Jeannie rushes to Liv's room with this note, and Liv is just reading the morning paper and is like, what's wrong? And Jeannie's like, read it. And she's like, this is utter nonsense. Where did it even come from? And Jeannie tells her, and Liv is like, well, I can tell you it's not from the SSA. Okay, I can tell you that for a fact. And Jeannie's like, how do you know? And Liv says, because it wasn't. And she's like, okay, then who? And Liv is just like, just somebody who hates me. And she's like, I would blame my cousins but they just left. She's like, I'm gonna make sure that nobody's been doing some fuck shit. We'll figure it out. And Jeannie's like, someone else in the house, and Liv is like, well, it must be because they left it in your fucking room. And Liv thinks to ask, hey, did you talk to anybody yesterday? Who were you talking to? What were you doing? And she's like, yeah, I did. I can manage them. It's fine. But she talked to all those fucking servants. And then Liv is like, oh, it might be better coming from their lord than from you, the new person. And Liv tries to be like, well, someone in town could have overheard when we were talking. Like, what about the baker who is nosy, Nancy? And Liv is like, Nancy? Nancy wouldn't do that shit. I know Nancy. And Jeannie is getting like really frustrated, and she's like, I grow weary of your imperious statements, particularly the ones that, for all I can see, have no basis in fact whatsoever. Because obviously Liv is keeping stuff from her. But Liv is like ignoring her, which kind of a mood. Jeannie's kind of having a big fit. I do like how this ends up going though. But she's like, well, I don't recognize whose handwriting it is, so I need some comparisons to figure out who the fuck this is from. And she's like, okay, tell me who you spoke to. And Jeannie does, and Liv is like, oh my god, what a fucking mess. But she's like laughing, and Jeannie's like, it's not funny. And Liv's like, no, it's not. And she's like, this isn't from the SSA. I know that for a fact, Jeannie, but it is a genuine threat. And I'm gonna talk to Hadley and also anyone else who knows about me. And Jeannie says, well, who else knows? And it's only a few family friends outside of the couple of servants and the main family. She's like, I can't imagine any of the family friends saying anything, but I'll check. And she's like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of it, don't worry. Don't you want to relax in the library this afternoon? Like, I can give you the cabinet key. And Jeannie is getting pissed off, and she's like, oh, don't you dare try to fob me off. And Liv is like, I didn't mean it that way. Because Jeannie is kind of just jumping to conclusions about how everyone else treats her all the time. And Liv tries to reframe it and be like, I just thought some nice peace and relaxation might help you. And Jeannie is like, Olivia Plumtree, do not speak to me like a man. I detest man speak. And Liv is like, I'm sorry, sweetheart, like I didn't mean it. And Jeannie stomps her foot and is like, don't you sweetheart me. And Liv is trying not to like laugh a little bit, not to smile. And Jeannie is like, don't you dare laugh at me either. It's like, I don't know what in the world you're thinking, but I'm extremely annoyed with you right now. Do not push me. And Liv's like, I wouldn't even think of it. I know Liv is hot. So Jeannie's pissed off and she's gonna go off, but she decides to turn around and she's like, give me the cabinet key then. And Liv is still trying not to smile because she's like, haha, gotcha. And then she marches out of the room to go to the library. So Jeannie spends the whole day hiding in the library, buried in some books, and a couple of the sisters have tried to coax her out of the room, but she won't. And Rebecca doesn't even try because she's like, I know my sister's temper. She sucks. So it's the next day after that, and there's no note again, which is good, but she hasn't heard about the first one, so she's frustrated. So she goes to see Olivia, and Liv is like, hey, sorry to say there's been really no progress at all, but it's only a matter of time. I have my cook, my housekeeper on lookout, and I've also written to my cousins. And Jeannie is still, again, pissed off for her own reasons. Bangs are driving me bonkers, fam. Why can't Bangs cooperate? I don't know. They hate me. But Jeannie is like, did you even try? Did you even try? Like, this could ruin you and your family. If you'd only tell me everything, I could help you. And Liv just cuts her off and is like, no. And Liv says, stop asking me. You are only gonna frustrate both of us. I've told you what I can, and I've sworn to tell you all as soon as possible. That's all there is to this, you know? And again, Jeannie's getting real pissed about not being told the secret shit. And she says some mean ass shit where she's like, and this is what it means to be something real, something honest in your life. I weep to think what your other acquaintances must suffer. And immediately after, the moment it was out of her mouth, Eugenia wished it back. Olivia looks upset about this because no shit. And Jeannie wants to go to her and beg for forgiveness, but shame overwhelmed her and she forgot how. So she ran back to her room where she threw herself on the bed and cried. I feel like even though the characters are doing some of the things we might see in a book I like less, because we understand their actual emotions and what kind of a repressed society this is, I don't care as much. I actually deeply enjoy that like we're having the drama, but we also know why the drama is occurring. And also because I care about their relationship, I care if they don't get back together. And it also says Eugenia hated her own cruelty more than anything else in the world. I like that it also kind of just calls out Jeannie, and she's also aware that she says cruel things sometimes, that she lashes out on people. I loved that we actually talked about it. Yeah. So about half an hour later, her sister comes in and she's like, Jeannie, oh Jeannie, it's awful. And Jeannie is like, have them pack your things, we're going home. And Rebecca's like, what? Because that's not what she came here for. And Jeannie's like, I'm pretty sure the engagement's off, we're going. And Rebecca's like, but no! And she's clutching a paper tight in her hand, and she's like, Oliver loves you, and I know you love him. Oh, Jeannie, you can't! And she runs to her and she takes her sister's hands, and she's like, you'll never have another offer, and he's so wonderful in his family. And Jeannie's like, enough, Rebecca. She like snatches her hand away. And Rebecca's like, but she's also like, I actually came to show you something though. And it's a letter that says, Lady Rebecca Ratna, your family will be ruined if they join with the Plum Trees. We will see to it, signed the SSA. And Jeannie's like, what in the world? And she also found it by her bedside table. And Rebecca's a little bit what I would classify as a little bit of a flighty Regency era woman, where she's barely a woman probably. However, she's very much like, oh, I don't want you to do that because I would be so bad for you, but also maybe after reading this, you shouldn't marry him. It's not really genuine. It's just that she's like nervous, clearly. It makes me think of Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, except that she's less annoying, I would say. And Jeannie's like, okay, but you just said. And Rebecca's like, okay, in my distress, I forgot, okay? Why I was coming here. And Jeannie thinks to herself that her sister is a ridiculous creature, which I find a bit offensive, thank you. But it does make Jeannie think some shit. Eugenia shook her head at her sister, then looked at the note in her hand, then considered just how ridiculous she had been. So much more ridiculous than Rebecca even. And I still think Rebecca is probably maximum older teenager, so that makes sense. And she's like, listen to me, Rebecca, no one is going to stop me marrying Oliver but me if I so choose. I received one of these notes too. Oliver's been looking into it, but frankly, I think he needs some help. Rebecca's like, if you put your really smart fucking minds together, I'm sure you can figure it out. And she's like, oh, Jeannie, I so want you to marry him. And Jeannie is a little bit bitter, and she's like, yes, I'm sure it would be good for you if I married him. And Rebecca's like, oh, well, I admit that I'm not ready to leave. I'm having so much fun. Country luxury is really novel, isn't it? And Jeannie's just like, yeah. Rebecca finally seemed to realize. She held her hands out to Eugenia, who took them, crumpling the note. But no, Jeannie, I swear, I only want you to be happy. And you seem so much happier here and with Oliver. I never thought it was possible for you. I thought you were determined to be unhappy. But now I see you only needed the right man, one who'd treat you with respect. Well, she was half right anyhow. Impressively so. Rebecca went on, of course, I'm glad it will mean things go more smoothly for me and Delaney, but now I know you can be happy. I think it must have been us making you unhappy, and I want to do all I can to make up for it, to help you keep the happiness you've found. For a moment, all Eugenia could do was stare and wonder who on earth this sweet little woman before her truly was. But no, that was unfair. Rebecca could be petulant and selfish, but she was young, and she learned quickly, as this conversation was proving. Eugenia had been unfair to her, unfair to everyone. See, I loved that we got to see her sister having realizations that also makes Jeannie have some realizations. I loved it. I loved it. It was great. Rebecca's like, well, if you don't believe me, I guess that's what I deserve. And Jeannie's like, it's the strangest thing, Becca. I actually do believe you. And Jeannie's like, I've been an idiot. Like, thank you. You've helped me set my mind right. Rebecca's like, you never expected that from me, did you? And I love it. And Jeannie's like, never, but I'm really glad of it, so thanks. And she's like, what will you do? And she's like, I'm going to the kitchen. And Rebecca's like, for what? She's like, this must have been someone who works in the house, and I'll wager they weren't doing it for free. So I'll find out if any of the servants have been flashing around a bit of wealth. And Rebecca's like, oh, you think someone paid someone to do this? And they're like, but who's, she's like, but who's the SSA? And she's like, well, they mean for us to think it's the secret society of Alchemiya. She's like, no, I hear they use human bodies in their alchemy, which, well, I suppose we do too, but we don't murder for it. So funny to me. You know what it actually makes me think of, because I finally finished my Nona reread? It makes me think of how a lot of the other houses in the Locked Tomb judge the 9th house for being like obsessed with skeletons, and the 8th house even calls them cultists, but they're all fucking around with dead bodies. So like, they're all necromancers. It's just hilarious, you know? And Jeannie's like, I've been told it's not true that they use people's bodies, you know? She's like, I also think the odds of this having anything to do with the SSA are very slim, which I agree with. She's like, I'm gonna read it because I feel like it was so self-aware. I loved it. I've been told that's not true, but regardless, I think the odds are good that this has nothing to do with the SSA and is more likely someone taking advantage of my well-known distaste for such organizations to scare me off Oliver. I thought that was so smart. I was like, yes. Oh my God. After some of the books we read here on this channel, this was such a breath of fresh air. A 114-page breath of fresh air. Okay. And at first Rebecca's like, who? But then she like has like a realization kind of look, and Jeannie's like, yeah, now you see, I'm off. So she talks to people who are servants, and there's this new footman named Dirk who has been bragging about a turn of his fortune to basically anyone who will listen. And there was talk of a maid Lucille showing her roommate an amethyst necklace that Dirk had given her. They're like a romantic item. It was not unthinkable that a servant should afford such a love gift. It was more the bragging and its effect on Dirk's coworkers that set Eugenia to thinking. I like how they're like, hey, servants, no matter what they're paid, can save up to buy something so luxurious or whatever, but it's kind of the framing of it. I appreciate that. Thank you. And so she goes to Olivia's study, and Hadley's in there, and she's like, oops, sorry, Hadley. She's like, I just need to see Lord Plumtree really bad. And she's like, can I also ask you a personal question? If you don't want to answer, that's fine. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he's like, I don't know anything about secret societies though. She's like, no, I should have known. And it'd be all over the house that I was asking questions. She's like, no, I was foolish yesterday, and that's one of the reasons I want to talk to Lord Plumtree. And she's like, can I just ask why you're so loyal to him? Like, he mentioned that you were understanding. And this is where we learn that Hadley is a trans man. Yay! I love the idea of like hiring LGBT servants in a kind of repressive world when you're also LGBT. This was also in Tipping the Velvet, which I reread with my book club. Doing some rereads this year, it's interesting. But one of the exes, by the end, she hires other lesbians to, you know, have more loyalty so they're not spilling about her doing lesbian ass shit with all these other upper class women. But she's a shady piece of shit, and this is nicer. And I love that he says specifically, Lord Plumtree uses what power he has to help those of us who haven't the choices and options he does to live our lives freely, at least within these walls. And I think it's very interesting because in the next conversation we're going to learn that the servants don't pay anything or have anything docked from their pay for like room and board. That's all free, which is not common practice, I don't think. I mean, I don't think they necessarily charged you for room and board, but they certainly were not paying you as much because a lot of these Regency types were very like, oh no, they held tight to their wallet is what I'm trying to say. And she says, oh, I understand completely. Well, like not completely, that would be very presumptuous. And she's like, thank you for trusting me with this, Hadley, like I won't fail you. And Hadley says, well, it's not just because I'm kind. I would share that I'm trans with the world if I could, but it's just not that way. And she thanks Hadley, and he says, by the way, my answer isn't everyone's, and there's a lot more to it than just that, but you know, you can work out the rest on your own. So Liv lets her in and is kind of like, obviously looks off because of their fucking fight or whatever. And this is where we learn that their room and board is paid for, and so most of the servants keep the majority of their wages. And she asks Liv about Dirk and Lucille, who's his new fiance. And Liv at first is like, oh, I wish they'd said because like I would have gotten them a gift, which is like cute. And Jeannie's kind of like, oh, I have bad news for you, honey, and like explains. And Liv thankfully immediately is kind of like, well, it's not incriminating. He was in service before, but at Lindsay, it's a ramshackle old house owned by an even more ramshackle family. Perhaps they were generous with his parting wages. She didn't sound as if she believed it though, which I appreciate. However, when they go to talk to him later in a little bit, I think it's great that she doesn't immediately, like no one comes out immediately swinging and accusing, you know, and I appreciated that. I feel like sometimes they're trying to write like strong characters, but they're also trying to convince you that they're kind, and they don't do it well. I think her Mortal Champions, I don't know if they were trying to convince us that she was kind, whatever her name was. It was something stupid. Bronte, there we go. However, I do think that they were trying to get us to root for her, and it was basically impossible. And Dirk has apparently told the servants to mind their own business when they ask like, hey, where'd you get that money though? I love some gossip. I love some gossip. In the immortal words from Ever After, ooh, I love a good intrigue. And Liv is like, thanks, actually, I appreciate all the help because that actually makes things kind of easier. You know, we'll go talk to him right now. And Jeannie's like, can I come? And Liv is like, yeah. And they go to ask Dirk some stuff, and Liv kind of does this thing where I think it's like very smart, where she's like, hey, I heard that you've like come into some money. I only am asking because I'm hoping it's nothing dreadful, like if someone died and you need time off for a funeral, or you need to get your affairs in order, like you only need to ask, it's fine. Which I think is like not only super cool employer, but it's a smart move, you know, because you're not immediately coming out and being like, I suspect you of shit. And he's like, oh, nothing like that, it was just a bit of a flutter. And he like clearly is involved in it was obvious, but I don't really care. And they ask if he like won at gambling or something, and he's like, oh yeah. He's like, I play in town at the Cabbage Head. And Liv is kind of like looking like nothing's is amiss, but still. And then she asks if he reads and writes, and he says yeah. He's like, could you just write that down for me quick? Dice at the Cabbage Head so I don't forget, please. And he does. He looks like a little bit amused, but he does. And then it's the same handwriting, so she takes out the notes. Is like, did you write this, Dirk? And he's like, oh, no. And Liv is like, please come to my study. We have to have a conversation about this. And we should do it in private. And Jeannie is impressed by Liv handling this situation. I agree. Pretty hot. She was so much smoother and more authoritative than Eugenia could manage. It was oddly attractive. It's not oddly attractive, it's just attractive. And she, when they get there, Liv is like, if you were having financial difficulty, you could have just told me. Okay? And he's like, well, I wasn't really. It's just that that lady offered me so much money. And Liv is like, Mrs. Plumtree, my cousin? And he's like, yeah. And Liv is like, she knew that you were new here, no doubt. She keeps a running tally of everyone we employ, not to mention every piece of silver in the pantry. That's nuts. And Dirk's like, she said it was just a joke. And Liv is like, does this seem like a joke to you? Threatening my betrothed and her sister with ruin. Does that sound like a joke? And Dirk's like, no. And Liv is still very understanding. It's like, I know that things are different for you all. I know that there are problems that are more immediate than the downfall of some lofty lord and lady. And Dirk's like, am I getting fired? And Liv is like, yeah, I'm afraid I have to let you go. I don't want to, but hey. It's like, I can find you a new place though if you want. And for some reason, Dirk is like, I don't want your charity, my lord. I'll find my own place. And Liv is like, I'm not gonna lie on your references though. And Dirk is like sneering. Is like, you think you could find somewhere to take me in spite of that? Liv just looks at him and is like, I'm owed a lot of favors actually. And Dirk is like, thanks my lord, that won't be necessary. And Liv's like, if you change your mind, let me know. And in the meantime, here's 2 weeks wages as like severance. You need to be out of your room by tomorrow. If you need a place to stay. And then he cuts her off and says, I'll manage, because men are the worst. And then Dirk is like, bye. And once the door is shut, Liv is kind of like, who can blame him when his opportunities for social advancement aren't exactly shining, you know? And I like that she thinks about them. And Jeannie's like, he is being a little bit of a prick though. And Liv is kind of like, maybe in his position I would be too. She's like, anyway, it's done. And Dahlia was clearly the one behind all of this. And she says, she's usually far more clever, but we rushed her with our surprise announcement. And Jeannie is like, I should have thought of this from the beginning. And Liv is like, samesies, I should have thought of this from the beginning too. And she's like, as if her being out of the house would keep her from meddling in the house. She's like, I've sent her a letter that is kind of like a veiled warning, being like, did you see anything? And kind of being like, I know you did it, you know, but not saying it outright. And Jeannie's like, can I read the letter? And Liv is like, yeah, when I'm done with the letter, you can read it. And so Jeannie's leaving the study. So I love this part. Here we go. By the time dinner was done, Eugenia had composed a lengthy and heartfelt apology and revised it several times in her head. She would not be caught wanting this time. When Olivia went upstairs, she beckoned for Eugenia to follow. And she tries to start apologizing, and Liv says, it's not necessary. And she's like, no, it is. Let me talk. I love that. And she holds Liv's hand. It's like, I'm so sorry for how I spoke to you. I was frustrated. I took it out on you in the most abominable way. I know what it means to you to be honest with me, and I threw it back in your face when you didn't give me what I wanted. Yes! Yeah! I was like screaming, crying, throwing up because like the only issue I had been having with this book is I was like, Jeannie is being like really bratty. And I understand why, because she's frustrated about the like not having all the info. But the fuck? But then she had this beautiful apology. And then Jeannie continues, you must know that I am afraid that I'm not used to caring so much for someone. The urgency of my feelings took me by surprise and I let them carry me off. So romantic. And Liv is like, thank you for saying all that. But I must admit, it's as much my fault. I want so much to lay everything before you and you thought I already had. Of course it's a shock. I swear to you though, I'm hiding nothing of which you would disapprove. And then Liv asks if she can accept that. And Jeannie's like, I would be a fool not to. Sacrificing the best possible life and a chance at love for some point of principle she could never. And she's like, I'll never get another opportunity like this, she says out loud. And Liv says, no, I don't suppose I will either. And Jeannie says, oh no, like queer girls are a dime a dozen if you know where to look. And Liv looks at her and says, that's not what I meant. Ah! And Jeannie says, I know, and I wasn't talking about your house and your position or my freedom when I said opportunity. Oh. And they're like, hey, let's forget about it. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Tonight, I just wanna, and then this devolves into sex. They say they missed each other. I was screaming. Also, it ends, if you wanna know, with Liv squirting. And she's like, I didn't know I could do that. And well, I mean, Jeannie says first, I didn't know you could do that. And Liv's like, I didn't know you could make me. I didn't hate it. I'm kind of getting used to that now. It's kind of what it is now. Like my book club was so upset because there was surprise fisting in Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. Sorry if I spoiled that for you, but I'd already read it, and also the same thing had happened to me when I read She Who Became the Sun, so I'm starting to become just desensitized to it. I don't know. And then after they're done, Liv is like, does it help if I tell you that it's not a secret I keep for myself, but to protect the others who share it? And Jeannie says, yeah, that actually does help. And Liv's like, but you still hate it. And Jeannie's like, I'm sorry, but it's all right, Liv, really. And Liv is like, I'm thinking of something. Just give me a few days, please. And Jeannie's like, you have my whole life. And then they kiss, and then Jeannie falls asleep. I loved it. Jeannie wakes up, Oliver's not there, there's a note, and she's going to call in some old favors in the Golden City and she'll be back ASAP. Eugenia frowned at first, but then decided it was more sweet than irritating that Liv had taken off to solve this particular problem herself. In truth, Eugenia hadn't expected a solution before the wedding. That Liv would even try. She could wait a day, even if it made her listless to ponder one without Olivia. She'd wasted so much time already. Oh, I love it. But then Rebecca, because she goes back to her room. She was in Liv's room, but now she's back in her room. Rebecca runs in. She's like, Jeannie, oh, Jeannie, my poor sister, I hate to break your heart, but I found out something you simply must know. Oliver Plumtree is not all that he seems. And Jeannie's like, yeah, I know. And she's like, but Jeannie, he's a woman. And she's like, you silly thing, did you think I'd ever agree to marry a man? And Rebecca's like, you knew? And she's like, of course I did. So this is the only instance of the outing. It's okay. She's like, Oliver told me the night we were leaving the Golden City. She's like, how did you find this out? And Rebecca overheard the girls, the sisters of Oliver talking. And that's how she found out. She was eavesdropping. And they had been talking about how much they liked Jeannie and how much they liked Jeannie marrying their sister. And she's like, it was for a good cause though, the eavesdropping. And Jeannie's like, it was for a useless cause. And Rebecca's like, I didn't think, like, of course though, like it suits you since you hate men. And she's like, I don't hate men. I hate the patriarchy. Just because I have no interest in seeing a man naked. And Rebecca's like, Jeannie. And Jeannie's like, well, it's true. Samesies. Been there, done that, nasty. No. Even the ones that I know are like aesthetically attractive, nothing but annoyance when I look at them. And Rebecca's like, have you and Olivia, you know, And she's like, of course you wouldn't expect me to buy a horse without taking it for a ride, would you? That is my personal opinion also. And Rebecca's laughing, but she's like, you're horrible, hee hee hee. And then we get to some homophobia where Rebecca's kind of like, it won't be a real marriage though. And Rebecca's like, it can't be. She's like, one of you must be a man for it to be a real marriage. She might as well have punched Eugenia in the solar plexus. Why it should surprise her, hurt her so much, she wasn't even certain. She'd known it was the way of things her whole life. But for just a few days there, she'd almost forgotten that people like her weren't allowed a happily ever after. And Jeannie is like, does that have to be true? And Rebecca's like, of course. She's like, anyhow, you wouldn't like being married. I know you. This is so much better. And Jeannie's like, why do you say so? She's like, your trysts, how you flit from one to the next like a butterfly. Surely Olivia won't, deny you going out and doing that. And Jeannie says, she wouldn't, but she's kind of angry now. And she's like, but have you ever thought, my dear sister, that perhaps I engage in so many trysts because nothing else was possible for me? Have you thought for one moment how very lonely it can be for me to know that I would never be allowed to have a partner in life? That meaningless sex, which is all very well and good, but does grow old for some, was all I might ever have for satisfaction. And Rebecca is a little confused, so she's trying to clarify, and she's like, I only meant, but she's also like, but she's, stuttering a little bit, and she's like, you once said marriage was an instrument of enslavement, so, which is like a good point. And she says, and so it is when it enslaves a woman to the will of her husband and servitude to his children. But think, Eugenia, think how, that's the one error. I think she meant think, Rebecca. Think how much more it could be if it were a partnership between two equals, or more, I don't know. Think how much might be accomplished by two people who thought as one, be it temporarily or forever. Isn't that a real marriage? And Rebecca's like, I never knew you were so romantic. And Jeannie's like, yeah, the things you know about me could fill the library, so leave me alone. And I liked that we had that conversation because it was a way to talk about this world's homophobia while at the same time also acknowledging that Jeannie felt like it was dangerous to dream about having any of the things that any of her peers had. And I really relate to that because even though gay marriage was illegal up here in the Northeast, in my state around when I was in high school, and then I think it was earlier in Massachusetts where I went to college, but it was not legal in the whole country. It felt very much like being a second-class citizen, but also it felt kind of dangerous to dream, to see people acknowledge you and your spouse. And when the information was announced, that's when I had proposed to my now ex, yay. But I understand the feeling like there's no point in hoping for something you cannot have. So the next morning, Jeannie is going for a stroll in the garden and Olivia's back. She's like, my sweetheart, my darling. And she's like, I came from the Golden City. And Jeannie's like, in one fucking day, you must have ridden like an insane pace. That's crazy. And Liv is like, I think that I brought something for you that will help ease this problem. And we can marry without this secret between us. Eugenia could hardly believe her ears. Could it be true? Had Liv really ridden all day and night just to satisfy her on this point, even though Eugenia would marry her anyhow? She hadn't allowed herself to imagine it might really be true, but now it was before her. She could hardly wrap her mind around it. It's so sweet. She brought her this book. It's called Utopia, and Liv is like, read this, and if you understand, if you agree, come to me and I can tell you, not everything, but I can set you on the path of learning everything for yourself. And Jeannie's like, I really don't understand. And Liv says, it's from the SSA, the real SSA. And you'll understand when you read it. I know you will. And Jeannie's like, okay, who gave it to you? And Liv's like, a ton of people owe me favors. And if you do what I'm asking, I'll tell you who it is. She's like, now I need some toast and a nap. So bye. And Jeannie is like, oh, I should have kissed her, but I missed out. It's fine. So we go on to learn through this book, this is so fascinating, that Nicholas Flamel had a sister and they both kind of broke off into separate alchemical fields because the brother did not see things the same way as her. She wanted to heal the sick, feed the poor, create so many wonders, educate others in the way of magic so they won't fear it, and let's show everyone how to provide for themselves. But Nicholas Flamel says, what my sister proposes is dangerous. Magic is a secret that must be whispered only to those who can be trusted. exhausted. Yes, let us heal the sick and feed the poor, but let them come to us who have worked so hard and sacrificed so much to understand it. But the people in Nicholas Flamel's faction are afraid. They're afraid, so they agree with him because they don't, like, they've been persecuted, they don't want to die. So eventually the sister creates a secret society, which is what turns into the SSA, which is very dedicated to the rights of women and also dedicated to the rights of common people, not just the elite, obviously. But the actual name of the SSA is the Sisters Society of Alchemiya. And even though it's the middle of the night, Jeannie's like, I'm gonna go talk to Liv. So she goes to her room and she's like, oh, she's like, what? Hi, honey. And she's like, I read your book. And Liv is like, and? But she's like exhausted. She's like, and I understand, I think there is no secret society of Alchemiya, only a Sisters Society of Alchemiya. And you're dedicated to the ideals presented by the sister in the story. And Liv nods and says, yeah, to telling the truth of history too. And Jeannie's like, it's a real story, you're sure? She's like, yeah, we have primary documents that proves that it's real. Like, no wonder all the men at the Grand Duke's court are out to ruin the SSA with lies, if they even knew the half of it. But they don't really know anything about the SSA actually. And Liv says that the SSA is trying to achieve the right political climate. Like, we can't be unmasked too soon though. And Jeannie's like, yes, I see, like, I understand. And so you all promise not to tell anyone who hasn't been vetted and approved. And Liv nods and says, the process takes a year generally, and one condition of inviting you was our marriage, knowing that if you betrayed me, I'd be ruined too. Of course, Jeannie says. I've been so foolish. And Liv says that she really wanted her to know and she couldn't wait to tell her, but I swore faithfully and I couldn't bring myself to lie to them. Not when our mission is so important. And Jeannie's like, I understand, I agree, you knew I would agree. Like, if this is what the SSA is, Liv finishes for her, then you can see why the patriarchy is terrified not knowing who's behind this. She's like, and I also understand why you can't talk about membership. Like, I was resigned though, like I would have waited, like I'm quite finished being a brat. And Liv says, I wanted our wedding day to be completely yours and completely happy. I didn't want you to be worried about this. She's like, Livy, and Liv's like, it's my wedding present to you. And then they're gonna have sex, but that's off page. Also, we learn that the SSA doesn't allow men. It's obviously the sisters, whatever. So men aren't allowed, obviously, for precautionary reasons. And she goes to this meeting with Liv to the SSA, and this woman, Lady Bryant, she was very briefly mentioned in the beginning of the book, was at one of the parties where, you know, Eugenia and Lydia got caught, pretty much. She talks to Lady Bryant, who is like so excited for her to be here. She's like, I couldn't really befriend you because of like rules, but yay. And then also Nancy the baker from Liv's town is there, the one that she was like, she could have overheard. No, she's an SSA member. And Eugenia apologizes to her. She's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. But she's really excited, Jeannie is, to be a part of the society. No matter how small of a role she plays, she's really excited to be able to change some of this stuff. Now, it's a week before they're supposed to return to the Golden City for the wedding. I feel like in Corpse Bride when they're like, it's gotta be a wedding. And Rebecca comes in, she's like, I thought we could ask Delaney to make a new dye for some shit because that will keep him busy and away from us. And Jeannie says, hey Becca, I'm really sorry for biting your head off last month about the whole being gay and marriage situation. And Becca says, actually, I'm really sorry for being ignorant. I really am. And I'm so glad that you said something. I've been desperate to apologize to you, but I thought you'd prefer if I didn't bring it up. Jeannie's like, I did, but I've said so many awful things since we came to Waldgrove Abbey. I've forgotten half of them, but I could have been kinder to you and I'm sorry. No, please don't say that. Rebecca hooked her arm around Eugenia's. I'm not good at empathy, but I will try harder. I loved the sisterly bonding. I love that they're not against each other. It makes me very happy. And Jeannie is happy about this and she's like, that's all anyone could ask for. And Rebecca's like, okay, help me pick a color now. But she's like, don't ask Delaney to help with this color. Like, ask him to pack my alchemy things if he needs to feel involved. And Rebecca's like, you're still angry at him. And she's like, yeah, he tried to blackmail me, Becca. Like, and Becca's like, oh, I didn't know that. And she explains about the being forced to marry thing. And she tells Rebecca, like, hey, don't let him bully you. Like, if he tries, come here to us and we'll find you a better husband than he ever could, if that's still what you want. And Rebecca's like, okay. Again, I love the character growth and actually thinking about our actions and the words we say. And she's with Liv later and she's like, let's get married. And Liv's like, I thought that was the plan. She's like, no, I mean sooner, like as soon as possible, like this rest day, which only gives them 5 days to plan, by the way. And Liv is like, I think our sisters will be disappointed. And Jeannie's like, they don't need new dresses. And we can hire some extra help, like spread the money we'd usually spend on new things around the village. You know, we can buy ale from them, food from the shops and the kitchens, invite everybody. And Liv is obviously excited about this, but she's like, will your father be able to come in time? And she says, if he wants to see me married, yeah. And she's like, and also, I don't care if he comes. And Liv's like, your brother will be excited. She's like, I meant to have my revenge on him for blackmailing me. She explains the blackmail to Liv, and Liv's like, we could simply make him miserable here. If we put our minds to it, I'm sure we can devise some very embarrassing scenarios. And Eugenia's giggling and she's like, oh, can we? She's like, oh, and Cherry will want to help. We must ask her. The other girls will be busy with the expedited planning, but I'm sure she'll have more time for irritating a bad brother. And then Jeannie sighs happily and says, Olivia, and she's like, yes, darling, which I love the darling. It says, Eugenia finally said the obvious, I love you. And she says back, I know, I love you too, sweetheart. And that's the end. It was beautiful. My only complaint, I want to see the wedding. Why was there no wedding? I love weddings. When I get remarried someday, we're gonna have a nice wedding, okay? Future butch who's into me. You're gonna have an actual wedding. I want a real one. Okay? God. Conclusion. I thought that this book was so wonderful. It felt like such a breath of fresh air, to be perfectly honest with you. I feel like I've been reading either things that are really good or really bad. And there have been a couple in the middle, but not as many as I would like. I feel like there's just been a lot lately. I'm glad that this book made me think about my own kind of biases that I wasn't really thinking of, because I do want to give all books a shot, and there is a reason why I do buy books like this. I buy them because sometimes they're really good and I want to give smaller authors a chance. So I am excited to hopefully read more from this author. She has some romantasy too, so I'm thinking about looking at that. I loved that this book had a lot of character development. I loved that it focused a lot on the relationships. I really loved that about it. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 on Storygraph and Pagebound. Don't forget to follow me on Pagebound if you want. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I don't know, comment I don't know. This one doesn't have anything that like sticks out to me. I don't know. Pick a random emoji. Put it in the comments if you made it this far. I hope you guys have a really great weekend. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!